I caught my wife with another man, leading to a devastating crash moments later. While she was hospitalized, DNA tests exposed her years of secret affairs and revealed my daughter wasn't mine. Confronting her triggered a breakdown, requiring treatment, leaving me to pick up the pieces of our shattered life. I'm typing this from a hospital room where my wife Elaine is currently sedated. Yesterday morning around 7:15 a.m., we were involved in a car accident. I walked away with cuts and bruises. Elaine suffered a broken shoulder, fractured collarbone, 4 broken ribs, and a punctured lung. The doctors say she'll recover completely, but they're keeping her heavily sedated for now. This whole situation started when Elaine went out with her longtime friend Vanessa the night before. We were supposed to fly to Mexico for a vacation yesterday afternoon, but Elaine insisted on having one last night out. I suggested she stay home since it had started snowing, but she promised she'd be home at a reasonable hour. I went to bed around 10 p.m. and slept until 5 a.m. when I woke up and noticed Elaine's car wasn't in the driveway. We'd gotten several more inches of snow overnight. I figured she and Vanessa had a few too many drinks, and she decided to crash at Vanessa's place. I sent Elaine a text telling her not to drive and that I'd come pick her up. The message remained unread. I drove to Vanessa's condo. The front door was unlocked, so I walked in and checked the living room first. Nobody was there. Vanessa's bedroom was downstairs, and I didn't want to disturb her, so I headed upstairs to her guest room. That's when my life fell apart. I opened the door and saw 2 heads poking out from under the covers. I pulled back the comforter and saw my wife's head resting on some stranger's bare chest. The next thing I remember was Vanessa, Elaine, and this half-naked man I'd never seen before pulling me off of him. I don't remember attacking him, but apparently I did. I told both of them I was leaving, and Elaine had 5 minutes to get to my car, or not to bother coming home at all. She was in the car within 3 minutes. Driving in snow while upset is never a good idea. Another vehicle veered into our lane and forced us through a guardrail. That's what caused Elaine's injuries. Somehow, we both survived. Our children, David, 10, and Sarah, 6, don't know about the accident yet. They were staying overnight at my parents' house. I haven't called anyone. I probably should have, but this wasn't just a car accident. My entire life has been wrecked, and I'm trying to understand the damage before involving others. I feel numb, yet in pain, and not from the accident. The person lying in that hospital bed seems like a stranger to me. I want to ask her so many questions, but I'm not sure I want to hear the answers. She clearly doesn't love me anymore. No one with a conscience could cheat on someone they love. So now I have to question if she ever truly loved me at all. In my mind, the moment she cheated, our marriage ended. Part of me wants to walk out of this hospital room right now. The only thing keeping me in this room is our children. I desperately want to see them, but I have scratches on my face and neck. They'd know something happened if they saw me. As much as Elaine has destroyed our family, the kids need their mother. How can I sit here and watch over someone who has stabbed me in the back? Should I call her parents? What do I tell them? What do I tell the children? I can tell them about the accident, but I can't fake emotional support for their mother. They'll know something is wrong between us. How did my life come to this? This discovery was just the tip of the iceberg. I know I need to see a lawyer. That much I figured out. But how do I handle everything else? The immediate decisions? The next few days and weeks? I met Elaine when we were 16. We dated through high school and college. Until recently, we were each other's only physical partners. We married a year after college and had David a year later. 3 years afterward, Sarah was born, and I've spent every day since trying to spoil her rotten. I love my kids more than anything in this world. If not for them, I'm not sure I would still be here right now. Everything changed about 3 months ago. I felt us growing apart but couldn't figure out why. We're both 34 years old. We've known each other more than half our lives. I thought we were happy. I thought our family was solid. I thought I knew her. I can't stop staring at her in that hospital bed. This woman I've shared my life with for so many years, the mother of my children, my partner through everything life has thrown at us. And now I realize I don't know her at all. The betrayal feels physical, like someone punched a hole through my chest. The nurse just came in to check her vitals. I pretended everything was normal. We talked about the snow, about my scratches, about Elaine's medication schedule. Normal conversation while my world is collapsing around me. I'll sit here until morning. Then I need to figure out what to do about the kids. They're going to ask about their mother. They'll want to see her. I can't keep them away, but I can't bear the thought of pretending everything is fine either. What steps do I take now? How do I protect my children from the fallout of their mother's choices? How do I even begin to rebuild my life from this point? Update 1. For whatever reason, I couldn't respond to questions from my first post. It may have something to do with using a throwaway account. I could reply to comments, but nobody could see the replies but me. I tried posting this update in the Infidelity sub last night, but ran into issues. Hopefully this works better. My apologies to anyone who left a response. I appreciated the advice and support. After my initial post that day, I decided to stay one more night in the hospital room. With Elaine sedated and the lights dimmed, I leaned back in the recliner staring at the ceiling, listening to the beeps and hums of the medical equipment. I kept trying to understand how my life had reached this point. A part of me thought I was being too merciful just by staying in the same room, while another part still felt something for her. I didn't want to feel anything positive toward her. I felt weak for having any warm feelings for her. Over and over in my mind, I kept realizing there was no fixing things and returning to how they were. It was like a hurricane had swept through and destroyed the life we built. I broke down completely. The reality that a significant chapter of my life had ended hit me hard. When the nurse came to take blood samples the next morning, I excused myself. Elaine woke as I was heading toward the door and called out to me, but I pretended not to hear her. I went to get some breakfast, though I had little appetite. While scanning through my phone, I saw an unread text from Vanessa asking where Elaine was. I ignored it. At 7 a.m., I decided it was late enough to knock on her parents' door. Her father has always been an early riser. I planned to talk to him first, and he could decide whether to wake his wife. I spotted smoke coming from the wood stove in his workshop behind the house, so I knocked on the door before entering. He immediately noticed the scratches on my neck and the bruise on my cheek. I explained there had been an accident, and Elaine was injured, but we needed to talk before discussing details. He must have assumed I meant we needed to talk about the accident, because he woke his wife to hear what I had to say. We sat at their kitchen table as I explained how a car in the oncoming lane veered into ours. Having the heavier vehicle with four-wheel drive, I managed to keep us on the road until we hit the guardrail. The passenger door caught one of the vertical beams mounted in concrete. Even with side airbags, Elaine hit hard and sustained significant injuries, but I assured them she was stable and expected to make a full recovery. They both cried with relief, knowing their daughter was hurt, but would be okay. They immediately started talking about how they would help me take care of Elaine. That's when I stopped them and explained the accident wasn't the main reason for my visit. I told them about waking up that morning, texting Elaine, and driving through the snow to make sure she was all right. I described walking in on their daughter with a man I'd never seen and losing control. They looked shocked. I gave them her hospital room number and explained I'd always want them in my children's lives, so I hoped we could remain on friendly terms. I mentioned that my father was watching the kids, and I was divorcing their daughter since she had broken our vows. I told them I was going to tell the kids about the accident and that we were splitting up, but I wouldn't tell them their mother was a cheater. I made it clear that I wasn't the one who destroyed our marriage and my life. They tried to convince me I was being hasty, saying she made a mistake and giving the usual excuses. I simply smiled, told them I'd enjoyed having them as in-laws over the years, and walked out. When I got to my dad's house, I entered through the kitchen where he was having coffee. The only thing he knew was that I was supposed to be on vacation in Mexico. He stood and asked what I was doing there. I just grabbed him, hugged him, and broke down. He seemed to understand I needed to let it out before talking. He led me to the den and called for my mom. We urged her to have coffee first, but she knew something was wrong when she saw me there that early. I explained how I caught Elaine cheating, then described the accident and her injuries. I told them I'd informed her parents so they could visit her. My parents were stunned. When my mom asked what I planned to do, they both cried when I said my only option was divorce, after which I would focus on being the best father possible. As our conversation wound down, I heard my daughter Sarah squeal, "Daddy!" and come running down the stairs. That woke David, who joined us a few minutes later. I spent time hugging them, happy to see them. They eventually noticed my scratches. I explained about the accident and told them their mom was in the hospital but would be fine. I said their grandparents would eventually take them to see her and left it at that. I spent the day playing with, talking to, holding, napping with, and laughing with my children. Those two made me want to keep going. Until that point, I wasn't sure I wanted to continue, but they are worth living for, protecting, and cherishing. Elaine's phone was destroyed in the accident, so no one had heard from her in days. That night, I started getting texts from her mother's phone and knew they had to be from Elaine. I ignored them. They continued sporadically throughout the night, so I turned off notifications. The next day, I spoke with 3 law firms about filing for divorce. I met with 2 and liked the second one quite a bit. I plan to meet with the third highly rated lawyer to see if they impress me more. If not, I'm going with the second firm's top divorce attorney. Either way, I will have eliminated 3 top legal options from her list of potential representatives, which I consider a win. Custody is my main focus. I'm not seeking full custody and wouldn't want it if I could get it. The children need their mother in their lives, but because of what she did, she can never again be part of my life. We can use a third party to handle drop-offs so the kids can be where they need to be on time. There's no reason for me to ever speak to her again. I clearly never knew her, so why would I continue to interact with a stranger? 3 days ago, I received a call from Elaine's mother. She was crying and asked if I would please come to the hospital. Elaine was awake and asking for me. I told her I had no interest in seeing or speaking to her daughter and hung up. 10 minutes later, her father called. He said he understood my anger, but asked me to consider coming for just 5 minutes. He said Elaine was distraught, and the doctors were concerned about her blood pressure and heart rate. I said I would think about it, and hung up. An hour later, the hospital called. The doctor said Elaine was having complications and kept asking for me. He suggested my presence might help stabilize her condition. I reluctantly agreed to stop by for 5 minutes. When I arrived at the hospital, her parents were in the waiting room. They thanked me for coming and said the doctor would let me know when I could go in. After about 20 minutes, a nurse led me to Elaine's room. She looked terrible, pale, thin, with dark circles under her eyes. Multiple tubes and wires connected her to various machines. When she saw me, she reached out her hand. I stayed by the door. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, but said nothing. "I'm so sorry," she continued. "I never meant to hurt you. Yet here we are," I replied. "It was a mistake, a terrible mistake. It didn't mean anything. If it didn't mean anything, why did you do it?" She started crying. "I don't know. I was drunk. Vanessa kept saying I needed to have some fun before our trip. That stranger meant nothing to me. You're the only one I love. Stop. Just stop. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. It's that simple. Please, can we talk about this when I'm better? Can we try to work things out? For the kids? Number. There's nothing to work out. I'm filing for divorce. I came because the doctor said you were having complications. Now I've seen you're fine. I'm leaving. The kids need both of us. The kids will have both of us, just not together. I'll arrange a schedule with your parents for you to see them when you're released. But I've already spoken to lawyers. This isn't up for discussion. Her monitors started beeping faster. A nurse came in and asked me to step out. In the hallway, I ran into the doctor who had called me. Thank you for coming, he said. I know this must be difficult. Is she really having complications? I asked. He hesitated. Her physical recovery is proceeding normally, but her emotional state is affecting her vital signs. She becomes extremely agitated when discussing certain topics. Like her infidelity? He looked uncomfortable. I don't know the details of your situation, but whatever happened is causing her significant stress, which isn't ideal for her. Recovery. I understand. I came as requested, but I won't be returning. Her parents can update me on her condition for purposes of arranging visits with our children. Otherwise, please don't call me again unless it's a true emergency. He nodded, and I left. In the waiting room, I stopped to speak with her parents. I came as requested, I told them. But this doesn't change anything. I'll arrange for the kids to visit her when the doctors say it's appropriate. In the meantime, I'd appreciate updates on her condition, but only as it relates to when she can see the children. Her mother started to speak, but her father put a hand on her arm. We understand, he said, and we appreciate you coming today. I nodded and left. While driving home, I called the second law firm and scheduled an appointment for the next day. I decided not to waste time meeting with the third lawyer. I needed to get things moving. The next morning, I dropped the kids off at school and met with the attorney, Paula, who impressed me during our initial consultation. She was direct, professional, and seemed to genuinely care about my situation, particularly regarding the children. I explained everything that had happened since we last spoke, including my visit to the hospital. She took notes and then outlined the process ahead. Given the circumstances, and assuming she doesn't contest, we can file for a no-fault divorce, Paula explained. However, her infidelity gives us leverage if needed. For custody, I recommend a joint arrangement as you suggested, with you as the primary residential parent. We'll need to work out a visitation schedule that makes sense once she's released from the hospital. I want as little direct contact with her as possible, I said. We can arrange for exchanges to happen at a neutral location or through a third party. Many divorced couples use family members or professional services for this purpose. We spent the next hour going over financial details, division of assets, and potential child support arrangements. By the end, I felt more in control of the situation than I had since finding Elaine with that man. As I was leaving, Paula handed me her card with her cell phone number written on the back. Call anytime if you have questions or concerns, and try to take care of yourself during this process. It's going to be difficult, especially with the children involved. I thanked her and headed home to prepare for picking up the kids from school. On the way, I received a text from Elaine's father saying she would be released from the hospital in 3 days and would be staying with them during her recovery. He asked when the children could visit. I replied that I would bring them this weekend if the doctors approved. That weekend was brutal. I had to prepare David and Sarah to see their mother in her injured state without revealing the true nature of our marital breakdown. I told them Mom and Dad had decided not to live together anymore, but assured them we both loved them very much, and that wouldn't change. David, being older, asked more questions. Did you and Mom have a fight? It's complicated, I replied. Sometimes adults realize they can't stay married, even though they care about each other. Is that why you don't want to visit Mom in the hospital? I took a deep breath. I want to give Mom time to focus on getting better, and I need some time to figure things out too. He seemed to accept this, though I could tell he wasn't entirely satisfied with my answers. Sarah was less inquisitive, but more emotional. She cried when I explained Mommy and Daddy wouldn't be living in the same house anymore. I held her and promised everything would be okay, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. When we arrived at Elaine's parents' house on Saturday, her mother met us at the door. She hugged the children tightly, then gave me a nod that seemed to contain both gratitude and disappointment. She led David and Sarah inside while I waited in the car. After an hour, they came back out, both subdued, but not visibly upset. On the drive home, David told me their mom looked really hurt, but had promised she'd be better soon. Sarah said Grandma had made cookies, and Grandpa had shown them a bird's nest in the backyard. Neither mentioned anything about the divorce or asked why I hadn't come inside. I was grateful for the reprieve, knowing harder conversations lay ahead. That night, after the kids were in bed, I sat alone in the kitchen with a glass of water, staring at the divorce papers Paula had prepared. Tomorrow, I would file them, taking the first official step toward ending my marriage. Despite everything Elaine had done, despite the rage and betrayal I felt, there was still a hollow feeling in my chest as I contemplated signing my name to those documents. 16 years together, 10 years of marriage, 2 beautiful children, all of it damaged beyond repair by a single act of betrayal, or perhaps many acts I didn't yet know about. The thought made my stomach turn. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "It's Vanessa. We need to talk. It's important." First, deleted the message without responding, and turned off my phone. Whatever she had to say, I wasn't interested in hearing it. She had enabled my wife's betrayal, maybe even encouraged it. She was dead to me now, just like the marriage she had helped destroy. Update 2. I'm not sure where to begin with this update. So much has happened since I last posted. I managed to secure a very good lawyer. Paula's firm has the highest rating for representing men in divorce cases in my area. Instead of passing my case to someone else, she took it on personally. Everyone at the firm has been supportive and professional. I can tell they genuinely care about their clients beyond just collecting their fees. After agreeing to take my case, Paula and I went through the standard forms I needed to complete. I listed our property, bank account information, and estimates of what Elaine and I earn. When I explained about the accident and what happened just before it, Paula asked if I'd had an STD panel done. I told her I had, and everything came back clean. She then asked if I had documented the infidelity with pictures or video. I explained that I hadn't been thinking clearly enough at the moment to do that. Paula immediately phoned a private investigator her firm uses regularly and set up a meeting between us for the next day. I live in an at-fault state, so while I knew Elaine had been unfaithful, I needed actual evidence for the divorce to proceed in my favor. One of Paula's staff members was assigned to be the intermediary between me and Elaine's father for communications and to arrange drop-offs. I had her notify my father-in-law that the children could stay with Elaine the upcoming weekend and the following week. Paula then asked if I had arranged therapy for myself and the children. I told her I had my first therapy appointment scheduled for that week, but since the children hadn't been told anything beyond the basics, I was holding off on therapy for them. She advised me to let her know as soon as I felt they needed professional help, as she could recommend several good therapists. She seemed genuinely sorry about what I was going through. I usually dislike lawyers, but Paula appears to have a soul. She gave me a list of things to collect and do before our next meeting. Many of her instructions matched the advice I received from commenters on my previous post. When she told me to pick up 2 DNA test kits from the drugstore, I didn't think much of it. I knew it was standard protocol in these situations. I went home that night, did the cheek swabs for me and the children, sealed everything up, and mailed the kits after dropping the kids at school the next morning. 2 days later was Friday, and the intermediary dropped the children off with their grandfather for the weekend. I went to work and was just returning from lunch when I received an email notification from my personal account. I could see they were 2 emails from the lab, so I waited until I got back to my desk to view them. I opened the first email and clicked the link. The results confirmed David is indeed my son. I opened the second email and clicked that link. I read what it said, then I read it again. I started shaking my head in disbelief. I knew I needed to get out of the office before I broke down completely. I managed to take screenshots of both results and email them to myself as photo files. I went to my car and completely lost it as the realization set in. Sarah is not my daughter. I can't describe the pain. It felt like my soul had been ripped away. I didn't know who to call. I just sat there crying, wishing I could wake up from this nightmare. I downloaded the files from my email account and texted the images to Paula. Within seconds, she called and asked where I was. All I could manage to say was, work. She told me to stay put and that someone from the firm would be there shortly. I ended the call and opened my car door. I began vomiting uncontrollably until I was dry heaving. By the time I stopped feeling dizzy, one of the paralegals had arrived to pick me up. She drove me to the firm, and as soon as Paula finished with another client, they took me to her office. Paula immediately told me that sometimes tests come back with errors. She understood I was upset, but urged that we needed to test Sarah and me again at a local lab to ensure nothing was contaminated. I couldn't believe what was happening. Even after catching Elaine cheating, I had assumed the DNA test was just a formality. I never thought she was capable of having another man's child and passing it off as mine. I couldn't confront Elaine even if I wanted to. I didn't have concrete proof yet, but I couldn't imagine how she and I would ever have that conversation if the results were confirmed. One of the staff members at the firm checked my blood pressure to make sure it wasn't dangerously high. It was elevated, and I felt close to a panic attack, but I was also numb with shock. I wondered what would happen next. I struggled to process that my little girl might not be mine biologically. I wondered if both test results could be wrong. Maybe Sarah was mine and David wasn't. I knew I couldn't wait 2 days to know the truth. The intermediary arranged a time to pick Sarah up the next day for a few hours and then return her to Elaine's parents. We did the test in a proper medical facility with trained staff. There was no mix-up. I am not Sarah's father. The results took a day to come back, and she was back with her mother by the time I received them, but I cried even harder the second time. I'm glad Sarah wasn't there to see it. I sent the results to Paula, who called to check on me. She urged me to seek out family and not go through this alone. I got in my car and drove to my parents' house, crying the entire way. When I arrived, my mother knew something was wrong but couldn't get it out of me. Finally, I managed to say, "Sarah is not my daughter." Mom asked, "What?" But she had heard me correctly, and I couldn't repeat it. After about half a minute of silence broken only by my uncontrollable weeping, she stood and got her cell phone. She called my dad and told him to hurry home but to be careful, that I had bad news. My dad wanted to know what was wrong, but she just urged him to be safe and get home as soon as possible. He arrived about 20 minutes later, and we all cried together for hours. I'd console my dad, he'd console my mom, and they'd console me. but none of us could be consoled. They asked about David, and I assured them he was mine. They expressed relief, then felt guilty for being relieved about only losing one grandchild instead of two. They asked what I planned to do. I told them I didn't know. The only certainty was that Sarah would never want for anything she needed and most things she wanted. I didn't even care about potential child support at that moment. She was going to be taken care of. As horrible as I felt for myself, I felt even worse for Sarah, who was completely innocent in all of this. Did I want custody of her? Could I get custody even if I wanted it? I began to wonder if Elaine knew or suspected the truth. I suddenly wanted answers. I met with Paula after work on Monday. She told me she'd met with the private investigator hired to follow Elaine. Due to the accident, Elaine hadn't been out of the house to cheat again, so he didn't have recent evidence. But one of the things Paula had me bring was Elaine's old cell phone from a drawer at home. The investigator was able to access nearly every app as if he were on her destroyed phone. He found nude photos sent to and received from various men. There were countless messages and explicit texts with enough admissions of guilt to sway any judge. They asked if I wanted to see any of the pictures or read the texts. I declined, but Paula and I needed to plan how I would confront Elaine about Sarah. Paula thought it best to do it in her office if Elaine could be convinced to come. She called Elaine's mother's cell phone in front of me. I heard Elaine's voice for the first time since leaving the hospital. Paula got straight to the point and said she needed Elaine to meet with me to discuss some important matters. Elaine said she'd been waiting to talk with me. Paula asked if she had a lawyer we should contact. Elaine said she didn't have one but was willing to come the next afternoon. I could barely focus at work the next day. I left at 3 p.m. and headed to Paula's office, feeling nauseated. I arrived first, intentionally. I wanted Elaine to be forced to enter, sit on the side away from the door, and be unable to approach me. I was scrolling through photos of our family, a family that never truly existed, when she arrived. She needed assistance walking and still wore 2 casts from the accident. Once she was seated, water was offered, and the meeting began. Paula asked Elaine if she minded us recording the conversation. She agreed. As soon as we started recording, Elaine tried to apologize. I interrupted her and asked point blank how many men she had cheated on me with, and when it started. The private investigator had found enough evidence to know the man I caught her with wasn't the first by a long shot. She seemed confused, clearly not knowing what we knew. I asked her again to estimate how many men she had slept with since David was born. The specific time frame gave her pause, but she continued to act clueless. She still thought she could play games, and I was losing my patience. Paula put her hand on my shoulder and gently pushed me back from the table. She looked at Elaine and asked if I was a good father. Elaine quickly gave me a glowing review, saying she couldn't ask for a better father to raise her children. I wanted to flip the table at the way she phrased it, her children. Paula then asked her if the other father of her child was going to be a good dad too. As Elaine was asking what other father Paula was referring to, my lawyer slid the paternity results for Sarah across the table. I needed to see Elaine's reaction in person. She was visibly shocked. She tried to hit me with the "you're her father who raised her" line. I shut that down and asked who Sarah's biological father is. She looked down, and I thought she might be protecting someone. When she said she didn't know for sure who Sarah's father is, I broke down completely. I couldn't take it anymore. Elaine was crying, but asked to explain. She reminded me about the postpartum depression she experienced after David was born. I had been as supportive as possible. I spent every moment I could caring for our son, so she could have time to herself. There were days she was so depressed she couldn't get out of bed, and I looked after all of us. I loved doing it for what I thought was my family. I had actually been foolish enough to think making it through that difficult time had strengthened our relationship. Elaine didn't blame Vanessa directly, but she explained that when Vanessa first got her to go on a few girls' nights out, I was relieved, even grateful. They had been best friends for years, but hadn't seen much of each other during her pregnancy. Elaine said she got extremely drunk the second time they went out, and she let some guy feel her up and performed a sex act on him. She claimed she felt guilty about it for months, but began to resent not getting to be young and free to be with whomever she chose. She told us she started hooking up with men on the nights she went out with Vanessa. Until the night before our accident, she had never stayed out all night or come home late over the years. She claimed she didn't want to develop feelings for any of the men. She said she always used protection and never slept with the same man more than 3 times. She claimed she just wanted sex. I was stunned. Finding out your wife has been unfaithful with multiple partners does that to a person. It was like learning your entire life is a reality show you didn't agree to participate in. I wanted to yell at her, but I was too busy calculating how many men she might have been with over the years. Paula asked her if she had any idea who Sarah's father might be. Elaine swore she always assumed Sarah was mine. Paula pointed out that something obviously happened and suggested maybe a condom broke. When Elaine confessed that had happened a few times with different men, I lost control. I asked her who she was because I didn't recognize the person telling me such horrible things so casually. I asked when she started hating me and why. I asked what I had ever done to deserve being treated this way. How could she do this to Sarah? I raged while she sat there, knowing it was all true. After what she just revealed and my reaction, divorce was inevitable. What had once been a marriage was now scorched earth. The only thing left was to count the casualties: a wife, a husband, a daughter, a half-brother. Then there were the grandparents and in-laws. Elaine had essentially destroyed 2 entire families. Her parents would be devastated when they learned the full extent of what she had been doing, and I intended to make sure they saw all the evidence the investigator found. Elaine claimed she never meant to hurt me. She swore she had no idea Sarah wasn't mine. I actually believed her about that part. I had no idea either. But DNA doesn't lie. I asked why she didn't just divorce me if she was unhappy. She said outright that she didn't want to lose the security I provided. She cried throughout the conversation, but my expression remained one of pure disgust. I asked if she felt any shame. She claimed she did. I asked how we were going to find out who Sarah's father actually is. Elaine started with some philosophical discussion about how I was already Sarah's father. I wasn't in the mood for that. Whoever Sarah's biological father is deserves to know, and Sarah needs his family medical history. The evidence the investigator found didn't go back to before Sarah was born. I asked Elaine if she had saved any of these men's contact information. She had the audacity to say the point of deleting their numbers was to never see them again. I pointed out she might have wanted to keep their numbers in case she needed to inform them about a pregnancy or an STD. I want my name removed from Sarah's birth certificate. DNA proves she is Elaine's child, but not mine. I've committed to supporting Sarah financially of my own free will, long past her turning 18. She will never want for anything. As for custody of David, I'm not sure what to do. Before the paternity test, I had strongly considered seeking a 90-10 arrangement, giving Elaine custody 1 weekend per month and certain holidays. Now that I know Sarah isn't mine, I don't feel right pursuing custody of her, even if I could get it. Since David is her half-brother, I don't want to separate them completely. I don't want either child to suffer, but I haven't seen Sarah since receiving the test results, and I can't let her see me break down because of them. Both children will need therapy, and I'll gladly pay for it. There's no way to know if Sarah's real dad can afford it, and my own therapy bills will be substantial. On the drive home after the meeting, part of me wanted to end it all. It seemed like the easiest solution for everyone. Both families could continue pretending about Sarah's paternity. Elaine could go on with her life. The children wouldn't have to deal with a broken marriage or failed relationships. But by the time I got home, I rejected that thinking completely. Paula is preparing divorce papers and legal documents to have me declared not Sarah's father. That will make things take much longer, but I want no legal obligation to interact with or pay for a child who isn't mine, regardless of my personal commitment to Sarah. Paula's legal team is researching ways to find Sarah's biological father. Many ancestry sites suggest potential relatives when results come back. That's our first plan of action. Even if the results don't identify a specific individual, they might point to a brother, cousin, or another relative. Whoever the man is, he may not be ready to accept a child he didn't know about. It could cause significant disruption in his life, but I doubt it will be nearly as devastating as what I experienced losing a daughter I thought was mine for 6 years. Everything is chaotic right now. Nothing feels stable. The children return to the house Sunday afternoon. I've never dreaded seeing them before, but I know there are inevitabilities I can't prepare for. When Sarah sees me and wants a hug from her daddy, I'm not sure how I'll react. Hug her and cry because she has never truly been mine? Tell her I'm not who she thinks I am? I don't have it in me to be cruel to her, but my heart is shattered. There's no one to direct this pain toward, not even Elaine. Nothing I could do, short of extreme measures, would equal her betrayal. That scale will never balance. She used me and discarded me. She deserves severe consequences for her promiscuous, deceptive behavior. I know I'll win the divorce case. Paula and her team will ensure it's one of the most one-sided divisions of assets in divorce history. But Elaine has already taken so much from me that it feels like she's already won. 3 days ago, I received a call from Vanessa. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail asking me to call her, saying she needed to explain some things. I deleted it without listening to the entire message. I have no interest in anything she has to say. Last night, a package arrived at my door. Inside was a handwritten letter from Elaine and a thumb drive. The letter began with yet another apology, then explained that the thumb drive contained text messages between her and Vanessa going back several years. She wrote that while it wouldn't excuse her behavior, it might help me understand how things unfolded. I haven't looked at the drive yet. I'm not sure I want to. This morning, Elaine's sister called me. We've always gotten along well, and she asked if she could come over to talk. I agreed, mainly because I respect her and her husband, who have always seemed like decent people. She arrived around noon, and we sat on the back porch with coffee. She told me Elaine had finally confessed everything to her, including the fact that Sarah isn't mine. She was devastated and ashamed of her sister's behavior. She asked if I had plans for telling Sarah the truth. I explained that I was still processing everything myself and hadn't made any decisions about when or how to tell Sarah. I asked her opinion, as someone who knows and loves Sarah but isn't as emotionally involved as I am. She thought for a moment, then suggested waiting until Sarah is old enough to understand the complexity of the situation. She pointed out that abruptly telling a 6-year-old that the only father she's ever known isn't her biological father could cause lasting psychological harm, especially coming so soon after her parents' separation. I agreed with her assessment, but mentioned my concern about Sarah potentially finding out from someone else. Her sister assured me she wouldn't say anything, and she doubted Elaine would either, given how ashamed she claimed to be. Before leaving, she handed me an envelope. Elaine asked me to give you this, she said. It's access to a savings account she's had for years. She wants you to use it for Sarah's future. I took the envelope but told her I had no intention of using Elaine's money. Sarah would be well provided for without it. She nodded in understanding and left. after promising to stay in touch regarding the children. After she left, I opened the envelope. Inside was a bank statement showing an account with just over $47,000 and a note with the online banking credentials. I placed it in my home safe, unsure what to do with it. Later that afternoon, I received a text from Paula. Just heard from her lawyer. She's hired Jensen and Associates. Good firm, but we're better. Meeting set for next Monday to discuss terms. So Elaine had finally retained counsel. I wondered where she got the money, given that she wasn't working due to her injuries. Perhaps her parents were helping her, though they had seemed firmly on my side when they learned about her infidelity. Then again, they didn't yet know the full extent of her betrayal or about Sarah. I called Paula to discuss strategy. We agreed that our position remained strong, especially with the evidence of infidelity and the paternity test results. She advised me not to reveal anything about Sarah to Elaine's parents yet, as it might complicate matters if they suddenly rallied around their daughter out of concern for their grandchild's future. Let's get the divorce finalized first, Paula suggested. Then we can deal with the paternity issues separately. I agreed, though it felt dishonest not to tell them. But Paula reminded me that Elaine had been dishonest with all of us for years, and we were simply being strategic now. That evening, I received a call from the private investigator Paula had hired. He had been monitoring Elaine's email and social media accounts and discovered something interesting. She had been in contact with a man named Thomas, who lived in the same city. Based on the content of their messages, they had known each other for at least 7 years and had been intimate multiple times. The timing suggested he could potentially be Sarah's father. The investigator asked if I wanted him to approach Thomas discreetly. I told him to hold off until I discussed it with Paula. This was moving faster than I had anticipated, and I needed time to think. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about Sarah and how this would affect her. I remembered the day she was born, how I had held her tiny hand in mine and promised to protect her always. I remembered teaching her to ride a bike, reading her bedtime stories, wiping away her tears when she fell and scraped her knee. For 6 years, I had been her father in every way that mattered. The fact that we didn't share DNA suddenly seemed both monumental and insignificant. I loved her. That hadn't changed when I saw the test results. What had changed was my understanding of the foundation our relationship was built on, a foundation of lies and betrayal. The next morning, I called Paula and told her about the investigator's findings regarding Thomas. She suggested we meet to discuss our options. When I arrived at her office, she had already compiled information about him. Thomas Green, 36, divorced, no children, works as an architect, she said, handing me a folder. He's been living here for 8 years, no criminal record, good credit, owns his home. On paper, he seems like a decent person. Do we know if he was aware of Elaine's marriage? I asked. The messages suggest he knew she was married but believed your relationship was essentially over and you were staying together for the children. Paula shook her head. A convenient lie, she told him apparently. And is there any indication he knows about Sarah? None that we can find. Their communications never mention children directly. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process this information. So what do we do? Legally, we have several options, Paula explained. We can approach him directly, we can have Sarah's DNA compared to his if we can obtain a sample, or we can wait until after the divorce and pursue this through family court. What would you recommend? From a legal standpoint, waiting until after the divorce simplifies things. From a human standpoint, she paused. That depends on what you want for Sarah. Do you want to remain in her life as her father? Do you want Thomas to know and potentially be involved? What do you think would be best for her? I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to continue being her father. I love her, but another part is so angry about being deceived that it's hard to separate those feelings. Paula nodded sympathetically. You don't have to decide everything today. Let's focus on the divorce first. But I would suggest considering therapy for yourself specifically around this issue. It might help clarify your feelings. I agreed and left her office with more questions than answers. On the drive home, I passed Elaine's parents' house and saw her father working in the yard. I made a spontaneous decision to stop. He seemed surprised to see me but invited me in for coffee. I declined, saying I couldn't stay long. Standing in his driveway, I told him I had something important to discuss. I've received some news that affects all of us, especially Sarah, I began. I recently had DNA tests done, and the results show that I am not Sarah's biological father. His face went pale. That can't be right. The tests must be wrong. I had them done twice, at different labs. There's no mistake. He leaned against his car, visibly shaken. Does Elaine know? Yes. We met with our lawyers yesterday. She admits she was with multiple men around the time Sarah was conceived. He put his head in his hands. I can't believe this. How could she do this to you? To Sarah? I don't know, but I wanted you to hear it from me before I tell your wife or anyone else. I'm still processing what it means for my relationship with Sarah going forward. He looked up at me, tears in his eyes. What are you going to do? Legally, I'm having my name removed from her birth certificate, but I've told Elaine I'll continue to support Sarah financially and be in her life. I just don't know what that looks like yet. He nodded slowly. You're a better man than most would be in this situation. Whatever you decide, I hope we can still be part of Sarah's life, and David's too, of course. I would never keep them from you, I assured him. You've been good grandparents, and none of this is your fault. As I turned to leave, he called after me. Wait, do you know who? We have a lead. but nothing confirmed yet. I'll let you know when we know more. He thanked me, and I got back in my car. As I drove away, I saw him still standing in the driveway, looking lost and broken. I knew exactly how he felt. When I got home, I found a message from my therapist confirming our appointment for the next day. I had a lot to discuss with her, particularly how to handle the upcoming weekend when the children would be back with me. I spent the rest of the day cleaning the house and preparing the children's rooms. I bought fresh groceries and made sure everything was ready for their return. Physical activity helped keep my mind occupied and prevented me from spiraling into dark thoughts. That night, I finally decided to look at the thumb drive Elaine had sent. I plugged it into my laptop and found it contained hundreds of text messages between her and Vanessa, spanning several years. I started reading from the earliest dates, around the time David was born. The messages confirmed what Elaine had told me about her postpartum depression and how Vanessa had encouraged her to go out. But they also revealed something more disturbing. Vanessa had actively encouraged Elaine to cheat, describing it as liberating and empowering. She had introduced Elaine to several of the men she eventually slept with and had sometimes participated in group encounters. As I read through the messages, I found myself becoming physically ill. The casual way they discussed their exploits, the code names they used for different men, the detailed descriptions of what they did, it was all too much. But I forced myself to continue, needing to understand the full extent of the betrayal. Around 2 a.m., I found the messages from the period when Sarah would have been conceived. Elaine had been with 4 different men in a 2-week span, including Thomas. There were joking references to a condom breaking with one of them, but she hadn't seemed concerned at the time. When she later discovered she was pregnant, she had initially panicked in messages to Vanessa, worried it might not be mine. But Vanessa had convinced her the timing probably matched up with our own encounters, and even if it didn't, I would never know unless she told me. I closed the laptop, unable to read anymore. The depth of the deception was even worse than I had imagined. This wasn't just Elaine making a series of bad decisions. This was a deliberate, ongoing betrayal, enabled and encouraged by someone I had considered a friend of our family. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face, trying to clear my head. As I looked at myself in the mirror, I hardly recognized the person staring back at me. In just a few weeks, I had aged years. The stress and shock had taken a physical toll. Tomorrow, I would see my therapist and try to make sense of everything I had learned. Then, I would prepare for the children's return on Sunday. Somehow, I had to find a way to be present for them, to be the father they needed, despite everything that had happened. I went back to my bedroom and picked up a framed photo from the nightstand, a family portrait taken just 6 months ago. We were all smiling, looking like the perfect family. Now I knew it had all been an illusion, a house of cards built on Elaine's lies. I placed the photo face down in a drawer. It was time to start building a new reality, one based on truth, no matter how painful that truth might be. Update 3. In an attempt to fulfill my promise to update more often, I'm back with what's been happening over the past few weeks. The intermediary from Paula's law firm texted me at 3 p.m. Sunday to let me know she had the children securely in the car with their belongings and was on her way to the house. I've never dreaded a text message more. What made it particularly tragic was that just weeks earlier, I would have smiled and anxiously awaited that same message. A reunion I once would have yearned for had become something I feared. I had no plans to mention divorce, paternity, or any issues with the children. Despite all my preparation, I knew I wasn't in the right state of mind to bring up any of that. My goal was to keep things as normal as possible, like the other times they stayed with their grandparents. While Elaine and I were on vacation, that's what I wanted. But I knew reality would be completely different, and I had little control over what might happen. Jessica, the intern from Paula's firm, pulled into the driveway. I watched from the front window as they arrived. I walked outside and down the steps as the car came to a stop. I was smiling as I approached the passenger side of Jessica's car. As soon as I saw Sarah in her car seat beaming a huge smile at me, I started crying. I was still smiling. You couldn't have knocked that smile off my face with anything, but I just couldn't stop the tears. I hoped maintaining a smile might convince the children and myself that everything was okay. As soon as I got Sarah out of her car seat, David was by my side, and I grabbed both of them and just hugged them. I told them I missed them. That was really all I could manage to say. I just kept crying. People can judge me all they want, but it felt different. It wasn't the same as the day I hugged my children goodbye before all this happened. Perhaps part of what I was feeling was grief over the destruction of our family unit. My heart was broken. Seeing Sarah and knowing she isn't biologically mine just crushed me all over again. That's what my life had become, every day bringing a new heartbreak. I discover more details about Elaine's affairs. I uncover pain I can't shield the children from. I'm reminded of past bonds that were all founded on lies. Jessica helped me get the children into the house. I grabbed all of their belongings, and she closed the doors and trunk. As soon as I put their bags down on the floor, I turned to see Sarah looking up at me. She didn't say anything, just looked at me with those eyes like she knew I was the one who needed comfort. I squatted down. She walked into my arms and wrapped her little arms around me as tightly as she could. That child broke me completely. I wanted to be strong, but no child should witness an adult cry like that. Everyone keeps telling me to do whatever causes the least damage to the children. That's logical. But what if everything causes damage? What if there's no way to prevent harm? Allowing Sarah to see me, someone who should be a source of strength and security, in such a state, must be damaging her. How could it not be? If I were to abandon her, it would destroy her. Yet by staying in her life while dealing with this knowledge, I'm hurting her too. A 6-year-old shouldn't have to console a grown man, especially for something that isn't her fault. I was filled with rage toward Elaine at that moment. But this little girl, who I was told was mine, showed me love the only way she knew how and kept hugging me. Then I had a realization. Sarah and I are both victims. As the adult, I should be able to handle this better. She doesn't even know she's been victimized yet. Like survivors of a disaster, we need to support each other because we're going through the same ordeal, albeit from very different perspectives. I'm experiencing the loss while trying to spare her much of the pain by taking it upon myself. I had been viewing this as Elaine taking my daughter from me, but it's equally true that Elaine took her father from her. The villain in this story is Elaine. I refuse to feel guilty for my reactions. There's no handbook for discovering your child isn't biologically yours. Reddit provides excellent advice for dealing with infidelity and navigating divorce, but there's no clear guidance for responding when you learn the daughter you raised was never yours. The only somewhat comparable situation would be children switched at birth, but in that case, a couple would face it together, having both been deceived. They would learn together that the child they raised isn't their biological offspring. Unless you've experienced something similar, you can't understand how it feels. After about 30 minutes, I managed to compose myself. Jessica left after receiving hugs from all three of us. I handed her a small envelope with $500 inside and told her it was for gas. We both knew it wasn't really for gas since she drives an electric vehicle, but she accepted it graciously. I carried Sarah around in my arms as David showed me some of the things he'd helped make with his grandfather. Sarah kept her arms around my neck, making sure I knew she'd helped stain some of the wood. I went into my standard "I don't believe you" game, and David joined in. That turned into a tickle session, first for Sarah, then David. I can't describe how wonderful yet heartbreaking it was to hear Sarah's squeals and laughter. Seeing David happy and laughing brought joy to my shattered world, but I knew the future held little of what we were currently enjoying. They teamed up to wrestle me. I appreciated seeing them work together, even if it was against me. Father or not, by the time Sarah is old enough to date, I'll have taught her to firmly say no when necessary. I put on some music. Ever since she was a baby, Sarah has loved music. I've danced with her from the first week she was born up until last month. I'm sure I look ridiculous, but I don't care. I have fun, and she loves acting as silly as I do. I ordered takeout for dinner. We aren't Asian, but we certainly eat like it. David can devour an impressive amount of lo mein for a 10-year-old. For some reason, Sarah loves crab rangoon. I didn't eat much. My appetite has disappeared completely since all this began. I just enjoyed having dinner with them again. They both had school the next day, so I got them bathed and ready for bed. David likes to read before falling asleep. I gave him a hug, told him I loved him, and said I'd see him in the morning. I got Sarah tucked into bed and read her a storybook, pointing out details in the illustrations. I had her nearly ready to fall asleep when I felt tears welling up again. I kissed Sarah on her head and told her I love you for the first time since finding out the truth. Call me whatever names you want, but saying those words was like allowing myself to acknowledge the reality. Everything in my life has become a struggle to determine what's real and what isn't. My love for Sarah is real. I love her. I do feel differently, which may be wrong, but I can't deny it. I've gone from not wanting to take anything away from her to wanting to continue giving her everything I can. It's a significant shift in perspective. I was waiting for Sarah to tell me she loved me too. Instead, she mentioned that mommy loves me. When I gently questioned why she said that, she revealed that Elaine had instructed her to say it. Through further questioning, and with David joining the conversation, I learned that Elaine had told the children she wouldn't be coming home because I didn't love her anymore. This manipulation infuriated me. I called our regular babysitter and arranged for her to watch the children for a few hours. Since they were already in bed and she could study while getting paid, she agreed. I drove straight to my in-laws' house without calling first. Upon arrival, I requested to see Elaine and was led to her childhood bedroom where she was recuperating. I asked for privacy, and her mother quickly departed, sensing my anger. Once alone with Elaine, I confronted her about blaming our split on my inability to love her. She defended her statement as technically true, which only angered me more. I pointed out that the reason I could never love her again was because of her deceptive, promiscuous behavior. She attempted to deflect blame and mentioned her previous apologies, which I dismissed as meaningless. I exploded, questioning what good an apology would do when it couldn't undo or prevent damage. I expressed my doubt about her genuine remorse and demanded to know how she could manipulate innocent children to make me appear as the villain if she felt any true guilt. When I asked when I became the bad guy who destroyed our marriage, she immediately cited my refusal to give her another chance. Her response was so outrageous that I questioned her medication usage and possible alcohol consumption. I no longer recognized the woman before me. It was as if a stranger had possessed her body. I asked if she felt justified in destroying everything for sexual gratification. She insisted it wasn't just about sex. I reminded her she had claimed to want no emotional involvement with these men. She explained much of it, especially initially, was about validation and enjoying being pursued. Our conversation lasted several hours. She acknowledged that during her depression after David's birth, I had been extraordinarily supportive. This made me question why she betrayed me so cruelly. She described feeling anxious to the point of suicidal thoughts, despite the joy of motherhood. She felt love for David and me, but simultaneously experienced depression and emptiness. Her extended leave from work due to her condition led to additional guilt as I supported the family financially and emotionally. She felt overwhelmed despite recognizing she wasn't bearing the actual burden of family responsibilities. She began questioning her decision to become a mother, despite having always wanted children. She withdrew from friends both in person and online during this period. Elaine recalled Vanessa's unexpected visit during this difficult time. I had been relieved to see Vanessa then, knowing she was assertive enough to engage Elaine, but kind enough to encourage her to open up. It took months before anything resembling a night out occurred. Initially, just getting Elaine to visit a coffee shop had been considered progress. In retrospect, I recognize many people would consider me foolish for allowing my wife to frequent bars with a single friend. Under normal circumstances, they'd be correct, and I should have ended this arrangement much sooner. However, at that point, after prolonged sadness and isolation, seeing Elaine happy even after just one outing had seemed like improvement. She attempted to explain that she had rapidly transitioned into being both a wife and mother within a short period. The attention from men, even if purely sexual, boosted her self-esteem. She claimed her first infidelity wouldn't have occurred if she hadn't been extremely intoxicated, though she admitted it was consensual. After crossing that line, she knew I would never touch her again if I discovered the truth, and she would lose everything since she had entered our marriage with nothing. When I asked if she ever anticipated me discovering her infidelity or considered how I might react, she admitted, knowing it would devastate me, and claimed to feel terrible about it. This prompted my obvious question: why continue the behavior? She described experiencing guilt, shame, and regret immediately after each encounter once sober. I recalled her noticeable sadness for a week following her first night out. Vanessa had visited, and they had talked privately for hours. Afterward, Elaine's demeanor had improved dramatically. She revealed confiding in Vanessa that day about feeling unworthy of me because of her actions. She understood that discovery would end our marriage and likely result in me gaining custody of David. She claimed to have decided to take the secret to her grave and attempt to be the best possible wife as compensation. With hindsight, this should have alerted me. However, we had an infant requiring care, and I had been handling 95% of parenting responsibilities. Overnight, my wife seemed restored to her former self. At the time, this appeared miraculous rather than suspicious. Within weeks, I returned to work part-time, then full-time, as Elaine functioned adequately as a stay-at-home mother. Looking back, the period around David's first birthday contained some of our happiest moments, at least from my perspective. Learning these times were happy because she was attempting to compensate for betraying me permanently altered those cherished memories. I questioned why she cheated again if I wasn't satisfying her needs. We had always maintained a healthy physical relationship outside of her depressive period, and she had always appeared to enjoy our intimacy. She explained that the longer she maintained her secret, the worse she felt about herself. Unlike after David's birth, she couldn't express these feelings to me. She knew I would want to comfort her and inquire about her sadness, but she couldn't reveal the truth. She mentioned when I attended a family reunion out of state with David, she had canceled at the last minute claiming illness. While I couldn't have prevented her infidelity at that point, I might have prevented her from conceiving a child that would deceive me for 6 years. I'm not blaming myself. She should have joined us on that trip. Better yet, she should have already confessed her infidelity and allowed me to move on. She described experiencing severe depression that weekend during my absence. She felt unworthy despite my ignorance of her actions. She was punishing herself, though I didn't know she deserved punishment. She recognized that discovery would result in my viewing her with disgust. Despite my consistent expressions of love, she realized at some point that knowledge of the truth would end my affection. My attention meant less because she knew she didn't deserve it, and I would realize that too if I learned about her encounters. She explained calling Vanessa for emotional support, who persuaded her to go out for drinks. According to Elaine, she spent the initial portion of the evening crying and seeking advice. After several complimentary drinks from the bartender, she found herself kissing a man behind the bar, but stopped herself. She returned inside feeling worse than before, realizing she had cheated again. More alcohol followed. When Vanessa needed assistance getting Elaine home, she asked the same man who had just kissed my wife. Vanessa left them alone, and intimacy occurred. When I asked if she ever considered David or me during these encounters, she became defensive and insisted she never betrayed her son. I informed her that she had betrayed not only me and David, but also Sarah, our parents, everyone who witnessed our vows, and the sanctity of our family and marriage. I shook my head in disbelief, telling her that despite her previous actions, she should have simply let me go. I would have cared for David, and she could have pursued whoever she wanted after divorce. Instead, she continued lying and cheating. Much of her story disgusted me. She apparently developed a strategy after the first few men. She avoided allowing them to become attached to her, since she had no intention of leaving me unless forced. She wasn't seeking emotional connection. She called her method fishing, obtaining a man's number, showing interest, withdrawing, encouraging pursuit, but on her schedule. When she claimed she already knew I found her attractive and seeking other opinions didn't feel wrong initially, I stared at her in disbelief. Notably, the bartender is definitively not Sarah's biological father. His involvement occurred months too early, and Elaine maintains they had only one encounter. When I inquired if she could recall the names of specific men during the relevant period, she claimed to remember only a few first names without knowing how to locate them. This effectively ended our conversation for the night. I wanted additional information, but I recognized I wouldn't get complete answers in one session. That wasn't my primary purpose for visiting anyway. With Elaine seated in a chair with her cast elevated on pillows, I positioned myself inches from her face and described her as a pitiful, soulless human being. I explained that her actions had caused immeasurable pain and would continue to do so. Looking directly into her eyes, I vowed not to allow her to hurt our children further. I emphasized that as the person deceived for 6 years, I deserved some leeway to focus on my needs. I warned Elaine that petty tactics and manipulation would only intensify my contempt. Reconciliation was impossible. Her touch disgusted me. Loyalty clearly wasn't a concept she understood. However, regardless of biology, I would remain loyal to Sarah. I would protect her as necessary, even if that meant shielding her from her mother's lies, manipulations, and deceptions. I threatened that Paula has colleagues who would benefit financially from having Elaine declared an unfit mother. This was a deliberate threat, and I meant every word. I insisted that any communication come directly to me, rather than through the children. Using them as messengers would not be tolerated. I stressed that Sarah should remain uninformed about our divorce and paternity issues for now. Eventually, when disclosure became necessary, I would personally explain the situation. I would describe how her mother had victimized us both, but we had survived together. I refused to allow the person who had destroyed so much to minimize the damage or shift blame. This conversation wouldn't happen in the near future if I could prevent it, and I would determine the appropriate timing. I pointed out her lack of legal representation and informed her the children would remain with me for at least 2 weeks. She needed time to contemplate her betrayal and the cruel manipulation that would ultimately hurt Sarah. She had few options to contest this arrangement. I had custody of the children, and she was physically restricted by her casts. She could experience some of the isolation she deserved. I've made numerous mistakes throughout my life. During the drive home, I repeatedly wished for foreknowledge of these outcomes. This represents my greatest current challenge, and I hope it remains the most significant one I ever face. The extent of destruction is overwhelming. The fraudulent marriage I endured needs complete dismantling. However, there's no reason to hurt a young girl currently unaware of the conflict between her mother and the man she calls daddy. I want to preserve that innocence as long as possible. The children cannot witness us together. When Elaine and I occupy the same space, the atmosphere becomes toxic. I refuse to subject the children to such negativity. I won't engage in conflict with her in their presence. However, I will immediately address any attempts at manipulation. This update has been extensive, and I apologize. Each decision seems to carry countless implications. Those arguing DNA doesn't matter must understand that hurting Sarah is the last thing I desire. I intend to support and advocate for her welfare. The ultimate resolution remains uncertain. Sarah and I both suffered betrayal by the same individual. I refuse to allow Elaine to damage Sarah as she damaged me. That outcome is unacceptable. No one will approach my daughter without my approval, a decision Elaine won't control. After evaluating someone's background and meeting them personally, I'll make that determination when appropriate. Until then, David, Sarah, and I are navigating this crisis together. I've managed to protect them from impending consequences thus far, and will continue shielding them from as much fallout as possible. Nevertheless, we'll all experience pain before this concludes. This devastation could have been prevented, but once detonation occurs, the damage becomes irreversible. I'm attending therapy twice weekly now. While I'm uncertain about its effectiveness yet, I'm still early in the process, so I'll continue for several more sessions at minimum. 3 days following my confrontation with Elaine, her father contacted me requesting a meeting. We arranged to meet at a small cafe downtown the next morning. He appeared exhausted, with visible dark circles under his eyes and defeated posture. He began by apologizing for his daughter's behavior, stating they had raised her better and questioning where they had failed as parents. I assured him they weren't responsible, as Elaine had made her own choices. He nodded slowly and revealed they had been discussing everything, trying to understand the situation. He mentioned Elaine had disclosed the truth about Sarah. I tensed and asked what specifically she had told them. He confirmed she had admitted Sarah isn't biologically mine and that she doesn't know the identity of the father. He appeared visibly shaken, expressing disbelief and questioning how she could do this to both Sarah and me. I acknowledged that no one could truly understand my feelings. When he inquired about my plans regarding Sarah, I explained I was legally removing my name from her birth certificate but would continue supporting her and maintaining a relationship with her, though the specifics remained uncertain. He reached across the table, briefly touching my hand while calling me a good man, better than most would be in this situation. He expressed support for whatever I decided. He then introduced another topic. He and his wife had been discussing Elaine's need for professional help beyond physical therapy for her injuries. They believed she required serious psychological intervention. I agreed with this assessment. He described finding a residential treatment facility specializing in depression, addiction, and trauma. They believed everyone would benefit if she spent time there. When I asked if she would agree, he stated they weren't giving her a choice. Since she was living in their home and using their resources, she would either get necessary help or find alternative accommodation. I inquired about the timeline, and he explained they planned to admit her immediately after her casts were removed the following week. The initial program lasted 60 days with potential extension if necessary. Regarding visitation with the children, he mentioned the facility permitted family visits after 30 days, depending on patient progress. He understood if I wasn't comfortable with this arrangement and suggested they could potentially bring the children to see her instead. I proposed evaluating the situation after 30 days and consulting with my lawyer. He agreed, and we finished our coffee in relative silence. As we prepared to leave, he paused to express their love for the children and continued consideration of me as family, stating those feelings remained unchanged. I thanked him, unexpectedly moved by his words. Driving home, I contacted Paula to update her on developments. She viewed Elaine's treatment facility admission as potentially beneficial for both divorce proceedings and future custody arrangements. She noted that acknowledging her need for help demonstrated self-awareness and desire for improvement. The court would view this positively, while also establishing her need for professional intervention. This created a situation advantageous for both Elaine and our case, while providing me time to determine next steps regarding Sarah. That evening, I explained to David and Sarah that their mother would be entering a specialized hospital to continue her recovery. I presented it as an extension of her accident treatment, emphasizing how doctors would help her physical and mental healing. David asked about visiting opportunities, and I confirmed they would eventually be permitted to visit after her initial treatment period. Sarah surprised me by asking if this was related to her mother's persistent sadness. When I questioned her perception, she described hearing her mother crying frequently, even before the accident, sometimes behind bathroom doors, when she thought no one could hear. I held Sarah and confirmed the treatment partially addressed her mother's sadness. The doctors would help with that aspect of her condition. David asked if I would accompany them on visits, and I hesitated before explaining I probably wouldn't, suggesting their grandparents might take them instead. When he questioned if this was due to my continued anger toward her, I acknowledged the complexity of the situation while emphasizing my commitment to everyone's best interests. Though he nodded, I recognized his incomplete understanding. How could he fully comprehend when I barely understood the situation myself? Later that night, after the children were asleep, Vanessa called unexpectedly. I almost ignored the call but answered out of curiosity. I greeted her coldly, and she immediately requested a meeting, claiming she had important information to share. When I mentioned reviewing her text exchanges with Elaine and knowing enough about her role in encouraging the affairs and introducing men, she questioned how much I had actually seen. I stated I had reviewed sufficient messages to understand her participation in the deception. As I prepared to end the call, she quickly mentioned having information about Sarah, specifically claiming knowledge of her biological father's identity. This revelation prevented me from hanging up. When I pressed for details, she refused to discuss it over the phone and requested a meeting the following day. I agreed to meet at a public park the next afternoon, then immediately contacted Paula to inform her about the call. She suggested having the private investigator attend discreetly to record our conversation. I welcomed this professional support. The following day, I arrived early at the park, noting the investigator positioned nearby with a newspaper. Vanessa arrived punctually, appearing noticeably thinner and less confident than in previous encounters. After exchanging brief greetings, she revealed Sarah's father is her brother, Thomas. I stared at her in shock. The investigator had previously identified a man named Thomas as a potential father based on email communications, but I hadn't connected this to Vanessa's brother. I confirmed this was the brother who had relocated to the area approximately 8 years ago. She acknowledged this and explained she had suspected it for some time, but only received confirmation recently when Elaine confessed after the accident while briefly staying at her residence. This new information required processing. I questioned how she could facilitate a relationship between her brother and my wife. She claimed the initial situation differed from what eventually developed. She described Thomas meeting Elaine at her birthday celebration about 7 years ago, during Elaine's severe postpartum depression. According to Vanessa, Elaine experienced a connection with him she hadn't felt in some time. When I expressed disbelief at her encouraging such behavior in a married mother, she admitted being completely wrong. She claimed once the relationship started, she couldn't stop it, and Elaine subsequently began seeing additional men, causing the situation to escalate beyond control. I questioned her current motivation for disclosure. She stated, Thomas deserves knowledge of his daughter, and Sarah deserves awareness of her biological father. She provided an envelope containing Thomas's contact information and recent photograph, confirming he remains unaware of Sarah's existence, as Elaine never disclosed her pregnancy to him. I accepted the envelope without opening it and asked if Thomas knew about her revelation. She admitted he didn't and anticipated his potential unforgiveness for her years of concealment. I sympathized with his position and confirmed his continued residence in the area. She described him as an unmarried architect with his own downtown firm and no known children. As I prepared to leave, I stated I would consider how to proceed with this information, while emphasizing this interaction didn't constitute forgiveness. She had contributed to my family's destruction. She quietly acknowledged this, expressing lifelong regret for her actions. Walking away, I exchanged subtle acknowledgement with the investigator, who confirmed recording everything. I proceeded directly to Paula's office, the envelope seeming increasingly significant. Paula listened attentively to my account of the meeting before calling in the investigator, who had arrived shortly after me. He verified everything and provided the conversation recording. Paula contemplated this revelation about Thomas Green being Sarah's biological father and Vanessa's brother. When I asked how to proceed with this information, she explained it depended on my objectives. Legally, we could approach Thomas, inform him of the situation, request DNA verification, and if confirmed, he would have certain rights and responsibilities regarding Sarah. When I questioned the alternative of keeping him uninvolved, she explained the increased complexity. Since I was removing my name from the birth certificate, someone needed legal recognition as her father. Otherwise, legally, she would become a child with only one parent. Feeling overwhelmed by these considerations, I expressed difficulty processing everything immediately. Paula reassured me that immediate decisions weren't necessary. She suggested taking time for reflection, consulting my therapist, and considering Sarah's long-term best interests. I thanked both professionals and departed. During the drive home, Thomas occupied my thoughts. This man, whose DNA Sarah carried, might have rights to her life. He might potentially separate her from me. Upon arriving home, the babysitter informed me Sarah had been repeatedly asking about her mother throughout the afternoon. Apparently, something had triggered thoughts of Elaine, causing Sarah increasing distress when the sitter couldn't provide satisfactory answers. I found Sarah in her room, drawing with intense concentration. Upon seeing me, she abandoned her activity and ran for an embrace. Kneeling to her level, I inquired about her concerns. She simply expressed missing her mother. I held her close while my heart broke again. When she asked why her mother couldn't return home and whether it related to misbehavior, I hesitated before explaining the complexity of the situation. I described Elaine making choices that damaged our family and now requiring specialized assistance for recovery. Sarah displayed perceptiveness by asking if her mother had hurt me, causing my persistent sadness. I acknowledged this, while emphasizing this remained between adults and didn't affect how much we both loved her. When she asked if my sadness would eventually end, I honestly expressed hope for improvement, noting that she and David helped considerably. This answer appeared to satisfy her, and she returned to her artwork. I observed her briefly, noting how she extended her tongue slightly while concentrating, identical to my own habit. This mannerism she had acquired from me, not genetics, reminded me that nurture sometimes outweighs nature. That night, after the children were asleep, I examined the envelope Vanessa had provided. Inside, I found a business card for Green Architectural Design, with contact information and a recent photograph showing a confident mid-30s man with dark hair. I studied his features, seeking resemblances to Sarah, noting similar nose structure and possibly eye shape. I returned everything to the envelope and placed it in my desk drawer. I wasn't prepared to make any decisions yet. For now, Sarah remained my daughter in all meaningful ways. The following morning, Elaine's mother called, sounding exhausted but composed. She informed me they were taking Elaine to the treatment facility that day, with her voluntary agreement. I acknowledged this positively, uncertain what else to say. She then mentioned Elaine's request to see the children briefly before departure, to say goodbye. I considered refusing but reflected on how the children might feel later discovering I had denied this opportunity. I asked about timing, and she suggested noon if convenient. I agreed to bring them to their house at 12:30 for a 15-minute visit, after which I would take them to lunch. She expressed sincere gratitude, noting the significance to both Elaine and her parents. After ending the call, I checked the time, just after 9 a.m. With the children at school until 3 p.m., I had several hours to prepare mentally for this encounter. I contacted Paula to inform her of these arrangements. She advised maintaining calm detachment during the visit and avoiding private conversations with Elaine. At 12:15 p.m., I picked up the children from school, explaining they were going to see their mother briefly before she went to a special hospital to get better. David seemed to understand the gravity of the situation, while Sarah was simply excited to see her mom. I reminded them that we would only stay for 15 minutes, then go for lunch at their favorite burger place. They both agreed, though David asked if their mother would be okay. I assured him the doctors would take good care of her. When we arrived at the in-laws' house, Elaine's father met us at the door. He looked tired but managed a smile for the children. He thanked me quietly as the kids rushed past him into the house. I remained on the porch, making it clear I had no intention of coming inside. He nodded in understanding and left the door open so I could see into the living room. Elaine was seated on the couch, her casts making movement difficult. When the children saw her, they ran to her, careful not to bump her injuries. She embraced them with her good arm, tears streaming down her face. From my position on the porch, I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see Sarah climbing onto the couch beside her mother, while David stood nearby, asking questions, judging by his gestures. Elaine's mother approached me with a cup of coffee, which I declined. She stood beside me watching the scene, occasionally wiping tears from her eyes. She commented on how difficult this was for everyone, especially the children. I remained silent, checking my watch repeatedly. She eventually asked if I thought I could ever forgive Elaine. I responded that forgiveness wasn't relevant anymore. This was simply about ensuring the children's well-being going forward. After exactly 15 minutes, I stepped into the doorway and called to the children. Elaine looked up at me, her eyes pleading for more time. I remained firm, reminding the children about our lunch plans. Sarah clung to her mother, not wanting to leave. David, sensing the tension, gently pulled his sister away, whispering something in her ear that made her nod reluctantly. Elaine hugged them both once more, telling them she loved them and would see them soon. She was visibly trying to hold herself together for their sake. As the children walked toward me, she called out, asking if she could speak with me privately for just 1 minute. I shook my head, took the children's hands, and led them to the car. On the drive to the restaurant, Sarah asked why I wouldn't talk to Mommy. I explained as gently as possible that Mommy and I had adult problems that made it hard for us to talk right now. David, with the awareness of a child who understands more than he should, told Sarah that sometimes grown-ups need time apart when they're angry with each other. I caught his eye in the rearview mirror and nodded slightly in gratitude. The lunch helped distract the children from the emotional visit. We talked about school, their friends, and plans for the weekend. By the time we finished our meal, Sarah was laughing again, and David seemed more relaxed. I dropped them back at school for their afternoon classes, promising to pick them up at the regular time. I drove directly to Paula's office afterward. She had received a call from Elaine's lawyer requesting a meeting to discuss temporary custody arrangements while Elaine was in treatment. Paula advised agreeing to the meeting, suggesting it showed Elaine was taking the situation seriously. We scheduled it for the following day. That evening, I received a text from Elaine's father informing me they had successfully checked her into the treatment facility. The doctors had evaluated her condition and adjusted her medication. They anticipated removing her casts the following week, which would allow her to participate fully in the program. He thanked me for bringing the children to see her and asked if they could visit her parents this weekend. I agreed, appreciating their effort to maintain normalcy for the kids despite the circumstances. The next day, Paula and I met with Elaine's lawyer, a middle-aged man named Robert Wilson. He seemed competent and straightforward, presenting documents outlining Elaine's treatment plan and a proposed visitation schedule for when she completed the first 30 days. The schedule included supervised visits at the facility, gradually transitioning to unsupervised weekend visits at her parents' home after 3 months, assuming her treatment progressed well. Paula questioned several points in the proposal, particularly the timeline for unsupervised visits. She emphasized my concerns about Elaine's mental stability and decision-making. Robert acknowledged these concerns, but noted Elaine's voluntary entry into treatment demonstrated her commitment to improvement. Throughout the meeting, I remained mostly silent, letting Paula handle the negotiations. When Robert directly asked about my willingness to facilitate a relationship between the children and their mother, I stated clearly that while I wouldn't prevent them from seeing her, I had serious reservations about her ability to be a responsible parent given her past behavior. I added that we hadn't yet addressed the issue of Sarah's paternity, which would necessarily impact any long-term custody arrangements. Robert appeared surprised by this statement, looking down at his notes with a frown. It became apparent that Elaine hadn't fully informed him about the paternity issue. Paula took the opportunity to present the DNA test results, explaining that I was in the process of legally removing my name from Sarah's birth certificate. The meeting ended with an agreement to the supervised visits after 30 days, with all other matters to be determined based on Elaine's progress in treatment and further legal discussions regarding Sarah's situation. Robert requested copies of all paternity-related documentation, which Paula provided before we left. On the drive back to my office, Paula commented on Robert's apparent surprise regarding Sarah's paternity. She suspected Elaine might be hiding information from her own lawyer, which could complicate matters. She advised me to prepare for potential resistance once Robert reviewed the DNA results and consulted with Elaine. The next week passed relatively quietly. The children settled into a routine, alternating between staying with me and visiting their grandparents on the weekend. David asked about his mother occasionally, but seemed satisfied when I told him she was working hard in her program and would be able to receive visitors in a few weeks. Sarah mentioned her less frequently, becoming more focused on school activities and her upcoming dance recital. My therapy sessions continued twice weekly. During one particularly difficult session, my therapist suggested I consider meeting with Thomas Green to discuss the situation. She pointed out that avoiding the issue wouldn't make it disappear, and that having a plan for addressing Sarah's paternity might help me feel more in control of the situation. I admitted the thought of meeting him terrified me, not because of who he was, but because of what he represented, the potential of losing Sarah. After careful consideration and discussions with both my therapist and Paula, I decided to contact Thomas. Paula suggested approaching him through a formal letter from her office rather than calling or showing up in person. This would provide documentation of the contact and give him time to process the information before responding. The letter was carefully crafted, explaining the discovery of Sarah's paternity without assigning blame or going into unnecessary details about Elaine's behavior. It requested a meeting to discuss the situation and included contact information for both Paula and me. We sent it by certified mail to ensure delivery. 3 days later, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Thomas. His voice was steady, but tense as he introduced himself. He requested to meet as soon as possible, preferably somewhere private. We agreed to meet at Paula's office the following afternoon. When I arrived for the meeting, Paula met me in the reception area. She had arranged for a conference room with comfortable seating and ensured refreshments were available. She reminded me to remain calm regardless of Thomas's reaction, focusing on Sarah's well-being rather than past events. Thomas arrived precisely on time. He was taller than he appeared in the photograph, well-dressed in a suit that suggested his professional success. His resemblance to Sarah was immediately apparent. The same nose, similar eye shape, and a certain way of holding himself that I had always attributed to Elaine's side of the family. Paula made introductions and outlined the purpose of the meeting. Thomas listened attentively, his expression revealing little. When she finished, he asked several practical questions about the DNA testing, the legal process for establishing paternity, and Sarah's current situation. His composure was remarkable given the circumstances. When Thomas finally addressed me directly, he asked about Sarah, her personality, her interests, her health history. I found myself talking at length about her love of dancing, her stubborn streak, her infectious laugh. As I spoke, I watched his face carefully, noting the mix of wonder and regret in his expression. He eventually asked if I had told Sarah about him. When I explained she didn't yet know anything about the situation, he nodded in understanding. He stated clearly that while he wanted to know his daughter, he had no desire to disrupt her life unnecessarily. He recognized that I had been her father in every way that mattered for 6 years. The conversation shifted to more difficult territory when Thomas brought up Elaine. He confirmed having a relationship with her years ago, but claimed he had no idea she was pregnant. He described their relationship as brief, but intense, ending when Elaine suddenly cut off contact without explanation. He had attempted to reach her a few times afterward, but eventually moved on. He expressed shock at learning she had been married the entire time, claiming she had told him she was separated and finalizing a divorce. Paula intervened when the conversation threatened to become too focused on Elaine's deceptions. She redirected us to the immediate concerns, establishing legal paternity, determining how and when to tell Sarah, and developing a plan for introducing Thomas into her life gradually, if that was what everyone agreed was best. After nearly 2 hours of discussion, we reached a tentative agreement. Thomas would submit to an official DNA test to legally establish paternity. If confirmed as expected, he would begin meeting Sarah in controlled settings, initially introduced as a family friend. We would consult child psychologists to determine the best timeline and approach for revealing the truth to her. Throughout this process, I would remain Sarah's primary caregiver, with Thomas gradually increasing his involvement based on professional recommendations and Sarah's comfort level. We would revisit the arrangement regularly, adjusting as necessary based on how Sarah responded. Before leaving, Thomas thanked me for my willingness to meet with him and for taking such good care of Sarah. He acknowledged the unusual and painful circumstances, expressing genuine respect for my position. He provided his direct contact information and asked if I would share a recent photo of Sarah. I scrolled through my phone and showed him several, his eyes filled with tears as he looked at his daughter's face for the first time. The meeting ended on a cautiously positive note. Paula remarked afterward that Thomas seemed reasonable and genuinely concerned about Sarah's welfare. She cautioned that emotions might change once he had actually met Sarah and developed a relationship with her, but for now, his approach seemed measured and thoughtful. That evening, I sat with the children during dinner, watching Sarah as she chatted excitedly about her day at school. I tried to see Thomas in her features, her mannerisms, her expressions. It was there if you knew to look for it, but so much of who she was had nothing to do with genetics. Her humor, her kindness, her resilience, these were qualities that had developed through our relationship and experiences together. The following week brought another development. Paula received a call from Robert Wilson requesting an urgent meeting. When we arrived at his office, he informed us that Elaine had been evaluated by the treatment facility's psychiatric team and diagnosed with a personality disorder that required more intensive therapy than initially planned. They had recommended extending her stay to 90 days minimum, with a structured outpatient program to follow. Robert explained that Elaine had initially resisted this recommendation, but eventually agreed after speaking with her parents. He provided documentation from her doctors explaining the diagnosis and treatment plan. The paperwork didn't specify the exact nature of her disorder, citing patient confidentiality, but noted that it affected her decision-making, impulse control, and relationship patterns. This news wasn't entirely surprising given Elaine's behavior, but having a clinical confirmation somehow made the situation more concrete. Paula requested copies of all medical documentation that could be legally shared, noting its relevance to our ongoing custody discussions. Before we left, Robert mentioned that Elaine had been informed about the paternity test results and the contact with Thomas. Her reaction had apparently been volatile enough to require sedation, which her doctors cited as further evidence of her condition. He assured us she was now stable and continuing with her treatment program. 2 days later, I received an unexpected visit from Elaine's sister, Kate. We had always gotten along well, though we weren't particularly close. She appeared at my door looking nervous, clutching a small package. After some hesitation, she explained that she had found something while helping her parents clean out Elaine's apartment. The package contained a journal Elaine had kept during the early years of our marriage. Kate had read enough to realize it contained information that might be relevant to the current situation, particularly regarding Sarah's conception. She had debated whether to show it to me, but ultimately decided I deserved to know everything. I thanked her for bringing it and invited her in for coffee. As we sat in the kitchen, she asked about the children and how they were coping. She offered to help in any way she could, acknowledging the awkward position of wanting to support both her sister and me. Before leaving, she hugged me tightly and whispered that she was sorry for everything Elaine had done. After she left, I placed the journal on my desk without opening it. Part of me wanted to read it immediately, to find answers to the questions that still haunted me. Another part feared what additional pain those answers might bring. I decided to wait until the children were asleep before making a decision. That night, after tucking David and Sarah into bed, I returned to my office and stared at the journal. Finally, I opened it, beginning with entries from 7 years ago, around the time of Elaine's depression after David's birth. The early entries confirmed much of what Elaine had told me about her feelings during that period. The overwhelming despair, the disconnection from herself and others, the guilt about not being a better mother and wife. She wrote repeatedly about feeling trapped and unworthy, describing fantasies of escaping her life entirely. As the entries progressed, she began writing about meeting Thomas at Vanessa's birthday party. Her descriptions of their interaction were filled with excitement and longing. She justified pursuing him by convincing herself our marriage was already effectively over, though she hadn't bothered to inform me of this decision. She described crafting elaborate lies to meet him, often with Vanessa's help. The most disturbing entries came after she discovered her pregnancy. She wrote about panicking, unsure who the father was. She described calculating dates and realizing the probability pointed to Thomas, yet she never told him, instead deciding to pass the child off as mine to preserve her security and avoid dealing with the consequences of her actions. The final entries I read described her increasing involvement with multiple men, her compartmentalization of these relationships, and her developing strategies for maintaining her double life. She wrote without apparent remorse about the thrill of deception, the validation she felt from these encounters, and her contempt for my continued trust in her. I closed the journal, feeling physically ill. The coldness with which she described her deceptions surpassed even my worst imaginations. There was a calculated quality to her actions that the journal revealed more clearly than our confrontations had. The next morning, I contacted Paula and informed her about the journal. She requested to review it for potential relevance to our legal proceedings. I delivered it to her office, warning her about the disturbing content. She thanked me and promised to read it carefully, making notes of anything that might impact our case. 2 days later, Paula called to discuss her findings. She confirmed the journal provided substantial evidence of Elaine's deliberate deception regarding Sarah's paternity, which strengthened our position legally. More importantly, for immediate concerns, it contained entries specifically naming Thomas as the man Elaine believed to be Sarah's father, along with details about their relationship that corroborated his account of events. Paula suggested having the journal professionally evaluated to confirm its authenticity before using it in any legal proceedings. She also recommended sharing relevant portions with Thomas's lawyer as they established his relationship with Elaine and his complete unawareness of Sarah's existence. This information could help protect his parental rights while also demonstrating that he had been deceived alongside me. With my permission, Paula arranged for copies of the relevant journal pages to be sent to Thomas's lawyer. She also scheduled a follow-up meeting to discuss next steps in the legal process of removing my name from Sarah's birth certificate and establishing Thomas as her biological father. The official DNA test comparing Thomas and Sarah was scheduled for the following week. I hadn't yet told Sarah about this, planning to present it as a routine doctor's appointment. Paula had arranged for a child psychologist to be present during the test to ensure Sarah wasn't alarmed or confused by the procedure. The evening before the test, I received a call from Elaine's mother. She sounded distressed, explaining that Elaine had attempted to leave the treatment facility without authorization. When prevented from doing so, she had become combative and required physical restraint. She was currently under increased supervision and had lost certain privileges within the program. Her mother worried this incident would negatively impact our custody arrangements. I assured her that while I was concerned about Elaine's stability, I wouldn't use a single episode against her provided she continued with her treatment. I reminded her that the children were doing well and would look forward to visiting her and her husband that weekend as planned. After hanging up, I called Paula to inform her about the incident. She made note of it, but agreed with my approach, suggesting we monitor the situation without making immediate changes to our agreements. The DNA testing process went smoothly the next day. The psychologist, Dr. Reynolds, was excellent with Sarah, presenting the cheek swab as part of a science experiment that many children were participating in. Sarah seemed to enjoy the attention and special stickers she received afterward. Thomas was tested separately, avoiding any contact with Sarah at this stage. Dr. Reynolds asked to speak with me privately after Sarah returned to the waiting room with the nurse. She inquired about my plans for telling Sarah about Thomas, offering professional guidance on approaching such a sensitive topic with a child Sarah's age. She emphasized the importance of age-appropriate honesty, consistency in messaging from all adults involved, and creating space for Sarah to express her feelings without judgment. We scheduled a follow-up appointment to develop a specific plan once the DNA results were officially confirmed. Dr. Reynolds provided reading materials about helping children understand complex family relationships and adjusting to significant changes in their lives. The next few days passed quietly. The children continued their routine, splitting time between school, activities, and visits with their grandparents. I focused on work and therapy, trying to prepare myself mentally for the changes ahead. Thomas called once to check on the testing process, our conversation brief but cordial. 10 days after the test, the official results arrived, confirming with 99.9% certainty that Thomas was Sarah's biological father. I forwarded the report to Paula, who immediately filed the necessary paperwork to amend Sarah's birth certificate and establish Thomas's legal paternity. With this confirmation, we scheduled a meeting with Dr. Reynolds to finalize our approach for introducing Thomas to Sarah and eventually explaining the situation to her. Thomas, Paula, and I met with the doctor for over 2 hours, discussing various scenarios and potential reactions from Sarah. Dr. Reynolds recommended a gradual approach, beginning with introducing Thomas as a family friend. She suggested several casual meetings in neutral, child-friendly locations before any disclosure about his relationship to Sarah. She emphasized that Sarah's emotional security must remain the priority throughout the process, regardless of adult preferences or legal considerations. We developed a timeline spanning several months, with regular check-ins and evaluations of Sarah's adjustment at each stage. Dr. Reynolds would be present for key conversations and available for consultations as needed. Thomas expressed complete willingness to follow this plan, acknowledging that building trust with Sarah would take time. The first meeting was scheduled for the following Saturday at a children's museum. Thomas would be introduced as my colleague's brother, who had recently moved to the area. Both David and Sarah would attend, providing a normal family outing atmosphere without placing undue focus on Sarah. I spent the days leading up to the meeting, helping the children process their mother's extended absence. David had begun asking more specific questions about Elaine's condition and treatment. I provided honest, but age-appropriate information, emphasizing that she was working hard to get better so she could be the best mother possible. Sarah had become more clingy recently, often wanting to sleep in my bed and seeking frequent reassurance that I wouldn't leave her. Dr. Reynolds had prepared me for this possibility, explaining that children often sense major changes approaching even when not explicitly informed. She advised maintaining consistent routines and providing extra affection without overcompensating or creating new dependency patterns. The morning of the museum visit arrived with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. I explained to the children that we would be meeting a new friend today, keeping my tone casual and positive. David asked a few questions about who we were meeting, while Sarah seemed more interested in the museum exhibits she wanted to see. When we arrived, Thomas was waiting in the lobby, dressed casually in jeans and a button-down shirt. He looked nervous but composed, smiling as we approached. I made introductions, noting with a tightness in my chest how his eyes lingered on Sarah, taking in every detail of her appearance. The initial interaction was slightly awkward, with the children shy around this stranger. Thomas had wisely brought small gifts, a dinosaur keychain for David having learned from me about his current obsession, and a small plush jellyfish for Sarah, connecting to the ocean exhibit she was excited to see. The thoughtfulness of these selections helped break the ice. We spent 3 hours exploring the museum, gradually falling into natural conversation patterns. Thomas was careful not to focus too much attention on Sarah, dividing his interactions equally between both children. By the time we stopped for lunch in the museum cafe, David was enthusiastically explaining his school science project to Thomas, while Sarah had begun asking him direct questions about various exhibits. Watching their interactions, I experienced a complex mix of emotions. There was pain in seeing the clear physical resemblance between them, now unmistakable as they sat side by side. There was fear about how this relationship would develop and what it might mean for my connection with Sarah, but there was also a strange relief in no longer being the only one carrying this knowledge, in seeing the first steps toward a new reality taking shape. As we prepared to leave, Thomas thanked the children for showing him around the museum. Sarah surprised everyone by hugging him goodbye, a gesture she typically reserved for people she knew well. Thomas looked momentarily overwhelmed before carefully returning the hug, meeting my eyes over her head with a look of wonder and gratitude. In the car on the way home, both children chatted happily about the day. David mentioned liking Thomas and asked if we could see him again sometime. Sarah nodded in agreement, adding that he knew a lot about jellyfish, which made him pretty smart. I promised we would arrange another outing soon, my voice steadier than I expected. That evening, after the children were asleep, I called Dr. Reynolds to report on the meeting. She was pleased with how it had gone, particularly noting Sarah's spontaneous hug as a positive sign. She reminded me that children often have surprisingly accurate intuition about people, sometimes recognizing connections adults try to hide. She suggested scheduling the next meeting within 2 weeks to maintain momentum without rushing the relationship. I also called Paula to update her on the meeting. She had received confirmation that the court had accepted our petition to amend Sarah's birth certificate. The process would take several weeks to complete officially, but the legal groundwork was proceeding as planned. She asked about Thomas's behavior during the meeting, clearly concerned about his long-term intentions. I assured her he had been respectful of boundaries and genuinely focused on Sarah's comfort rather than asserting his rights. The following week brought an unexpected complication. Elaine's lawyer contacted Paula requesting a meeting to discuss modifications to our temporary custody arrangement. When we arrived at his office, Robert informed us that Elaine had made significant progress in her treatment program and was requesting video calls with the children twice weekly, in addition to the planned in-person visits after the 30-day mark. Paula questioned whether such frequent contact was advisable, given Elaine's recent unauthorized departure attempt. Robert acknowledged the incident, but presented documentation from her treatment team indicating it had been an isolated event triggered by medication adjustment. her subsequent behavior had been compliant and engaged with the program. After some negotiation, we agreed to one video call per week, supervised by both Elaine's parents and myself. The calls would be limited to 15 minutes initially, with the possibility of extending them based on how the children responded. Paula insisted on a clause allowing immediate suspension of the calls if Elaine made any inappropriate comments or displayed concerning behavior. The first video call was scheduled for the following Sunday afternoon at Elaine's parents' house. I prepared the children by explaining they would get to see and talk to their mother on a computer screen. David seemed cautiously excited, while Sarah appeared more confused about the concept. When we arrived at the in-laws' house, they had set up a laptop in the living room with comfortable seating arranged for the children. Elaine's father explained that the treatment facility had a dedicated room for these calls to ensure privacy for both patients and their families. Elaine appeared on screen precisely at the scheduled time. She looked noticeably different, thinner, with shorter hair, but somehow more present than she had seemed in years. She smiled broadly when she saw the children, tears immediately forming in her eyes. The conversation started awkwardly, with Elaine asking general questions about school and activities. David answered politely, but briefly, while Sarah hid partially behind her brother, occasionally peeking at the screen. As the call progressed, David became more animated, telling his mother about his science project and baseball team. Sarah eventually moved closer to the screen, showing Elaine a drawing she had made. I remained off camera, but within earshot, monitoring the interaction. Elaine was careful to keep the conversation light and child-focused, avoiding any mention of our relationship or her situation beyond saying she was at a special hospital getting better. When Sarah asked when she was coming home, Elaine gently explained that she needed to stay at the hospital a bit longer, but was working hard so she could see them in person soon. As the 15-minute mark approached, Elaine's mother signaled that it was time to wrap up. Elaine told the children she loved them and would talk to them again next week. After the call ended, both children seemed subdued, but not upset. Sarah asked if Mommy was still sick, to which I responded honestly that she was getting better, but needed more time with the doctors. On the drive home, David asked if we would be seeing Thomas again soon. The abrupt change in subject caught me off guard, but I confirmed we had plans to meet him at the park that coming weekend. David nodded thoughtfully before commenting that maybe Thomas could help him with his new Lego set since he was good at building things. I agreed that might be a good activity for them. The second meeting with Thomas took place at a local park with a playground and picnic area. This time, Thomas appeared more relaxed, bringing a kite for the children to fly and a simple picnic lunch. The weather cooperated beautifully, and we spent several hours outdoors, the children alternating between flying the kite with Thomas's help and playing on the playground equipment. During quiet moments while the children were playing, Thomas and I talked more openly about the situation. He expressed gratitude for my willingness to include him in Sarah's life, despite the painful circumstances. He reiterated his commitment to following the psychologist's recommendations and respecting my role as Sarah's primary father figure. He also shared more about his own background, his divorce 5 years earlier, his career achievements, and his previous uncertainty about whether he wanted children. He admitted the news about Sarah had completely upended his perspective, giving him a purpose he hadn't realized was missing. As the afternoon progressed, I found myself less threatened by his presence than I had anticipated. There was something reassuring about his patient approach with Sarah, never pushing for more connection than she offered naturally. By the day's end, Sarah was comfortable enough to hold his hand while walking back to the cars, chatting animatedly about a butterfly they had seen. The following week marked 30 days since Elaine entered treatment. Her parents arranged for the children to visit her at the facility, a meeting I chose not to attend. They reported afterward that the visit had gone well, with Elaine appearing stable and engaged. The children had toured her living quarters, met some of her treatment team, and spent an hour in a supervised family activity. They returned with drawings Elaine had made for them and seemed content with the experience. Life fell into a new pattern over the next several weeks. The children divided their time between me, their grandparents, and now occasional outings with Thomas. The weekly video calls with Elaine continued, gradually increasing in length as her stability maintained. I attended therapy twice weekly, working through my complex feelings about the evolving family structure. After 2 months of these arrangements, Dr. Reynolds suggested it was time to begin preparing Sarah for the truth about Thomas. She recommended a series of age-appropriate conversations, beginning with basic concepts about different types of families and how children can have various kinds of parents. Thomas, Dr. Reynolds, and I met several times to plan these conversations, focusing on language that would be clear but not overwhelming for Sarah. We agreed that I would initiate the first discussion, with Thomas joining later conversations as Sarah processed the information. The evening I had selected for the initial conversation arrived too quickly. After dinner, while David was at a friend's house for a sleepover, I sat with Sarah in the living room surrounded by some of her favorite books about families. I began by reading one that specifically addressed adopted children and different family structures. When we finished the book, I asked Sarah what she thought about families that looked different from ours. She considered the question seriously before saying all families were good if they loved each other. I agreed, then gently explained that sometimes families change in unexpected ways, just like ours had changed when Mommy went to the hospital. I introduced the concept that sometimes children have more than 2 parents who care about them. Sarah listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I mentioned that Thomas was actually her biological father, explaining the term carefully, she looked confused, but not distressed. Her Her first question surprised me. Does that mean you're not my daddy anymore? I immediately assured her that I would always be her daddy, that I had raised her since she was born, and would continue to be her father no matter what. Thomas was an additional parent, not a replacement. Her next question was equally perceptive. Does David have a different daddy too? I explained that David was biologically my son, but that didn't make my love for either of them different. She nodded, processing this information with remarkable composure. After a few more questions, Sarah seemed to lose interest in the conversation, asking instead if we could play a game before bedtime. Dr. Reynolds had prepared me for this reaction, explaining that children often need time to absorb significant information, returning to it when they're ready, rather than processing it all at once. Over the following days, Sarah occasionally brought up questions about Thomas, each time a little more specific. Why hadn't he been in her life before? Did he love her even though he just met her? Would she have to live at his house sometimes? I answered each question honestly, but simply, emphasizing that all the adults in her life were working together to make sure she felt safe and loved. The next scheduled meeting with Thomas included Dr. Reynolds, who facilitated a more direct conversation about his relationship to Sarah. Thomas explained that he hadn't known about her until recently, but was very happy to be her father now. Sarah listened solemnly before asking if she could call him Thomas instead of Dad. For now. He readily agreed, telling her she could decide what felt right for her at any time. As weeks turned into months, our unconventional family arrangement gradually stabilized. Elaine completed her 90-day inpatient treatment and transitioned to an intensive outpatient program while living with her parents. She maintained regular contact with the children through video calls and supervised visits, slowly rebuilding their trust in her consistency. Thomas became an increasingly integrated part of Sarah's life, participating in school events and developing traditions unique to their relationship. He maintained respectful boundaries, never attempting to override my parental authority or rush Sarah's acceptance of him. The legal process concluded with Thomas officially recognized as Sarah's biological father while I retained legal and physical custody. We established a formal co-parenting agreement that outlined visitation schedules, decision-making protocols, and financial responsibilities. 6 months after the initial discovery, I found myself sitting on a bench at Sarah's dance recital, flanked by Thomas on one side and Elaine's parents on the other. Elaine sat several rows back, as per our agreement for public events. As Sarah performed her routine, her face lighting up when she spotted us in the audience, I felt a momentary sense of peace amidst the complicated reality we had created. Nothing about this situation had unfolded as I would have chosen. The pain of betrayal, the shock of learning about Sarah's paternity, the complete restructuring of my family, all of it had been thrust upon me without my consent. Yet watching Sarah now, confident and happy despite the upheaval in her young life, I recognized that we had managed to build something functional from the ruins. My therapist often reminds me that healing isn't linear, that I will continue to experience waves of grief, anger, and acceptance as we move forward. She emphasizes that my feelings are valid, regardless of how much time passes. The betrayal wasn't just about infidelity. It was about the systematic deception that robbed me of informed choices about my own life. I don't know what the future holds for any of us. Elaine continues her treatment, showing signs of genuine remorse and improved self-awareness, though I remain cautious about her long-term stability. Thomas has proven to be a thoughtful co-parent, his relationship with Sarah deepening gradually on her terms. The children are adjusting remarkably well, demonstrating resilience I can only hope to emulate. As for me, I'm learning to redefine my identity beyond the husband I thought I was, and the father I believed myself to be. The truth didn't destroy my relationship with Sarah, as I had feared in my darkest moments. Instead, it transformed it into something different, but no less meaningful. She still runs to me first when she's hurt, still wants me to read her bedtime stories, still calls me daddy, without hesitation. People often ask if I regret my decision to remain in Sarah's life after learning the truth. The question itself misunderstands what happened. There was never a decision point, never a moment when walking away felt like a viable option. From the instant I saw those test results, my concern was for her well-being, not for the technical definition of our relationship. Biology created Sarah, but 6 years of midnight fevers, skinned knees, bedtime stories, and morning pancakes created our bond. That reality exists independently of DNA, of Elaine's betrayal, of Thomas's reemergence. It's the one truth I can hold on to amidst all the lies. My love for Sarah was never based on biology, so the absence of it changes nothing essential between us. We continue moving forward one day at a time, redefining family in terms that make sense for our unique circumstances. It's not the life I expected or would have chosen, but it's the life we're building now, with Sarah's happiness at its center. In the end, perhaps that's all any parent can really hope to achieve. Update 4. It's been almost a year since my last update. Many people have sent messages asking how things are going, so I thought it was time to share the latest developments. Our situation has evolved significantly, though not without challenges along the way. When I last wrote, we had established a tentative co-parenting arrangement with Thomas involved in Sarah's life, Elaine continuing her treatment program, and me trying to maintain stability for both children. The past year has solidified some aspects of this arrangement, while introducing unexpected complications in others. Thomas has become a consistent presence in Sarah's life. Their relationship developed gradually, just as Dr. Reynolds recommended. He began with bi-weekly visits, usually for a few hours on weekends, then progressed to taking her for a full day every other weekend. Now he has her overnight once every 2 weeks, plus occasional dinners during the week when his work schedule allows. Sarah adapted to this arrangement better than anyone expected. After the initial confusion about Thomas's role in her life, she settled into a comfortable pattern of interaction with him. She doesn't call him Dad, preferring Thomas in most situations, though she occasionally introduces him to others as my other father. This terminology emerged organically, and both Thomas and I agreed to follow her lead rather than imposing labels. One afternoon about 6 months ago, Sarah came home from school with a family tree assignment. She asked for my help filling it out, concerned about how to represent her complicated family structure. We sat together at the kitchen table with the blank paper before us. Without prompting, she drew 2 branches from herself, one leading to me, David, and my parents, another leading to Thomas and his family. When she reached Elaine's position, she hesitated briefly before connecting her to both branches. The matter-of-fact way she mapped out her understanding of our family brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Thomas has proven himself trustworthy in his handling of Sarah's emotional needs. He consults me on decisions, maintains consistency with our established routines, and never attempts to undermine my role in Sarah's life. He's built a bedroom for her in his home, decorated with input from Sarah herself, but is careful to present it as an extension of her life rather than a replacement for her primary home with me. His parents, initially overwhelmed by the sudden discovery of a grandchild, have become important figures in Sarah's life as well. Thomas's mother in particular has developed a close bond with Sarah, teaching her to bake and sharing family stories. She's been respectful of boundaries, always coordinating with me before making plans, and sending Sarah home with handwritten recipes rather than elaborate gifts that might create awkwardness. David's relationship with Thomas developed in unexpected ways. Rather than jealousy, David showed curiosity about this new adult in their lives. Thomas, to his credit, never focused exclusively on Sarah during his visits, always including David in activities and conversations. They discovered shared interests in architecture and building projects, with Thomas helping David design increasingly elaborate Lego structures. Last month, Thomas took both children to a young engineer's workshop where David thrived. My own interactions with Thomas have evolved from tense cooperation to something resembling genuine respect. We communicate daily about Sarah, usually through text messages, but occasionally meeting for coffee to discuss longer-term considerations. These conversations remain primarily focused on Sarah, but have gradually expanded to include broader topics. While I wouldn't describe us as friends in the traditional sense, we've developed a functional partnership centered on Sarah's well-being. Paula helped us formalize our co-parenting arrangement through a detailed legal agreement that outlines responsibilities, decision-making protocols, and financial arrangements. Thomas contributes to an education fund for Sarah and covers expenses during his parenting time, but we agreed that disrupting her primary living situation with me would not serve her best interests. The agreement includes provisions for regular reviews and adjustments as Sarah gets older and her needs change. Dr. Reynolds continued meeting with Sarah regularly for the first 6 months, then transitioned to monthly check-ins. She remains available for consultation when specific issues arise, but reports that Sarah is adjusting remarkably well, demonstrating resilience and emotional intelligence beyond her years. She credits the consistent, drama-free approach all adults have maintained, particularly the lack of visible conflict between Thomas and me. The situation with Elaine has been considerably more complex. After completing her 90-day intensive treatment program, she transitioned to a structured outpatient program while continuing to live with her parents. Her therapists diagnosed her with borderline personality disorder with narcissistic features, which explained many of the behaviors that characterized our marriage. The diagnosis provided a framework for understanding her actions, though it didn't excuse them. Elaine's visitation with the children progressed from supervised sessions at the treatment facility to longer visits at her parents' home. Her behavior during these visits remained appropriate, with both her parents and mine reporting that she focused on rebuilding her relationship with the children rather than discussing our divorce or making negative comments about me. 6 months ago, Elaine secured a small apartment near her parents and a part-time job at a local bookstore. The structure and stability seemed beneficial for her recovery. Her treatment team reported consistent attendance at therapy sessions and compliance with medication. She began having the children for overnight visits every other weekend, always with her parents nearby for support. This arrangement proceeded smoothly until approximately 3 months ago, when David returned from a weekend visit noticeably withdrawn. After gentle questioning, he revealed that Elaine had spent much of the weekend crying, telling the children how much she missed their family and wished they could all be together again. She hadn't explicitly criticized me, but had described herself as finally healthy enough to be a real family again. If only I would stop being angry and forgive her. I immediately contacted Paula, who arranged an emergency hearing to address this violation of our parenting agreement. The judge temporarily suspended Elaine's overnight visits, requiring her to return to supervised visitation until a full evaluation could be completed. Elaine's parents, to their credit, acknowledged the inappropriate behavior and agreed to facilitate and supervise all future visits. Elaine reacted poorly to this restriction, missing several therapy appointments and calling my phone repeatedly despite the communication protocols established in our agreement. Her parents eventually convinced her to resume treatment, but her therapist reported concerning patterns of regression when faced with consequences for her actions. 2 weeks after this incident, I received an unexpected call from Vanessa. We hadn't spoken since our meeting about Thomas's identity a year earlier. She explained that Elaine had been contacting her daily, alternating between tearful apologies and angry accusations. Elaine had shown up at Vanessa's workplace the previous day, creating a scene that required security intervention. Vanessa wanted me to know in case Elaine's behavior escalated further. I thanked her for the information and contacted Elaine's treatment team to report the concerning behavior. They increased the frequency of her therapy sessions and adjusted her medication. Her parents implemented additional structure and supervision, essentially returning to the protocols established during her initial release from inpatient treatment. This intervention appeared effective until last month, when Elaine arrived unannounced at Sarah's dance recital. The parenting agreement specifically outlined procedures for attending children's events, requiring advance notice and seating arrangements that minimized potential conflict. Her appearance violated these terms, though she remained calm and left without incident when approached by her father. Following this, we arranged a mediated session with Elaine, her parents, her treatment team, Paula, and me to revisit the visitation arrangements. The psychologist leading Elaine's treatment explained that while she had made progress in many areas, she continued to struggle with appropriate boundaries and recognition of consequences. She recommended maintaining supervised visitation for at least 6 more months, with a gradual return to overnight visits only if Elaine demonstrated consistent boundary respect and emotional regulation. Elaine initially rejected this recommendation, insisting she was being unfairly punished for minor lapses in judgment. However, after her parents made clear they would not support unsupervised visits without her treatment team's approval, she reluctantly agreed to the extended supervision period. Throughout these challenges with Elaine, I've worked to shield the children from adult conflicts while being honest about the situation in age-appropriate ways. When David asked why they couldn't stay overnight with their mother anymore, I explained that she was having a difficult time with her feelings and needed extra help right now. I emphasized that her struggles weren't their fault and that everyone was working to help her get better. Sarah has asked fewer questions about Elaine, seeming to accept the changing arrangements with relative ease. Dr. Reynolds attributes this partly to Sarah's naturally adaptable personality and partly to the stability she feels in her relationships with me and Thomas. The consistency in these primary relationships appears to buffer the uncertainty in her relationship with Elaine. My own emotional journey has been equally complex. Therapy twice weekly for the first 6 months, then weekly ongoing, has helped me process the layers of betrayal and rebuild my sense of self. The rage that initially consumed me has gradually subsided, replaced by a more measured understanding of what happened. I still experience occasional waves of anger when confronted with reminders of Elaine's deception, but these episodes have become less frequent and less intense. My therapist suggested I might consider dating again last spring, noting that isolation wasn't serving my long-term recovery. The thought initially seemed absurd. I couldn't imagine trusting anyone enough to pursue a relationship. However, after several months of discussing the possibility, I agreed to at least remain open to social connections beyond my established circle of family and close friends. In July, I attended a fundraising event for David's baseball league, where I met Claire, a divorced mother of a girl on the team. Our initial conversations focused on the children and the event, but we found ourselves continuing to talk long after most other parents had left. She gave me her number with an invitation to call if I wanted to get coffee sometime. It took me 3 weeks to make that call. When I finally did, we arranged to meet at a cafe near my office during lunch hour. The conversation flowed naturally, covering our children, our work, and eventually the broad outlines of our previous marriages. I offered a simplified version of my situation, explaining that my ex-wife had been unfaithful and that I had subsequently learned my daughter wasn't biologically mine, though I remained her legal father. I also mentioned Thomas's role in our lives, wanting to be upfront about the unusual family structure. Claire listened without judgment, sharing that her own divorce had resulted from her ex-husband's gambling addiction and the financial devastation it caused. She had spent the past 4 years rebuilding her life and creating stability for her daughter, only recently feeling ready to consider dating again. Her straightforward approach to difficult topics matched my own, creating an immediate sense of mutual understanding. We've been seeing each other casually for 3 months now, usually meeting for lunch or an occasional dinner when both sets of children are with other parents. Claire has met David and Sarah twice, in casual group settings with her daughter present as well. These interactions were deliberately low-key, a picnic at the park, an afternoon at the local science museum, framed as playdates rather than significant introductions. The children seem to enjoy meeting Claire and her daughter, though I've been careful not to suggest any particular significance to these interactions interactions. When David asked if Claire was my girlfriend, I explained honestly that we enjoy spending time together but are taking things very slowly. Sarah showed less curiosity about the relationship itself, focusing instead on whether Claire's daughter might become a regular playmate. Claire understands and respects the complexity of my situation. She's in no rush to integrate our families, recognizing that our children's emotional well-being must take priority over adult relationships. Her patience and perspective have been refreshing, allowing our connection to develop naturally without artificial pressure. I won't pretend that this new relationship has been effortless. I've experienced moments of intense anxiety, wondering if I'm making another mistake in judgment, if there are red flags I'm missing, if I'm even capable of healthy romantic attachment after what happened with Elaine. My therapist has helped me distinguish between reasonable caution and paranoia, encouraging me to trust my instincts while remaining open to new possibilities. Claire has her own hesitations and concerns, having emerged from a different but equally painful marriage. We found common ground in our commitment to moving forward thoughtfully, prioritizing our children's stability while allowing ourselves the possibility of companionship and connection. Whether this relationship develops into something more significant remains to be seen, but the experience has helped me recognize that Elaine's betrayal need not define all my future interactions. Thomas's romantic life has also evolved during this period. 6 months ago, he began dating someone he met through work. He mentioned it casually during one of our coffee meetings, wanting me to hear about it directly, rather than through Sarah. He approached the introduction to Sarah with appropriate caution, waiting until the relationship had been established for 3 months before arranging a brief meeting. When Sarah returned from that visit, she reported matter-of-factly that Thomas has a friend named Melissa who likes birds, showing no distress about the development. As our unconventional family arrangement has stabilized, we've navigated several holidays and significant events. Last Christmas presented particular challenges, requiring careful coordination between multiple households to ensure the children didn't feel overwhelmed or caught in adult tensions. We developed a schedule that allowed them to spend Christmas Eve with me, Christmas morning with Thomas, for Sarah, and Elaine's parents, for both children, with Elaine present, and Christmas dinner with my parents, where Thomas and his parents joined us for dessert. This arrangement prioritized the children's experience over adult convenience, creating a holiday that felt special rather than fragmented. Sarah's 7th birthday similarly required coordination. We held a small family celebration at my house, including Thomas, my parents, and Elaine's parents, with Elaine joining for a designated time period. The following weekend, Sarah had a friend's party at a local play center, which all adults attended without incident. Thomas and I stood together watching her play with her friends, a moment of shared pride that would have seemed impossible a year earlier. Work has provided another source of stability throughout this period. My employers have been understanding about the occasional need for flexibility with court appearances and therapy appointments. My performance has remained strong despite the personal challenges, perhaps because work offers a space where I can focus on something entirely separate from family complications. Financially, the situation has stabilized as well. The divorce settlement was finalized 9 months ago, with minimal financial entanglement given the circumstances. Elaine received a small portion of our joint savings, but made no claim on the house or other significant assets. Thomas contributes to Sarah's expenses as outlined in our agreement, and Claire and I maintain complete financial separation, each covering our own costs when we spend time together. Looking ahead, we face several significant milestones. David will start middle school next fall, a transition that already concerns him. Sarah continues to thrive in elementary school, but has recently started asking more sophisticated questions about her family situation, particularly how to explain it to new friends. Elaine will complete her current treatment program in 3 months, requiring reassessment of her progress and potentially revised visitation arrangements. Through all of this, I've learned that family isn't defined by conventional structures or biological connections. It's created through consistent presence, reliable support, and genuine care. The family we've built isn't what I would have chosen or imagined, but it functions, imperfectly, sometimes awkwardly, but with the children's well-being at its center. I've also learned that healing isn't linear. There are still days when the magnitude of Elaine's deception hits me anew, days when I question every decision I've made since discovering the truth. But these moments have become less frequent and less overwhelming. I'm learning to trust my judgment again, to recognize that one person's betrayal doesn't negate my ability to make sound decisions or form meaningful connections. The children continue to be my primary focus and greatest source of joy. David has developed a passion for science, spending hours conducting experiments in the garage under my nervous supervision. His resilience throughout this upheaval has been remarkable, his natural optimism reasserting itself despite periods of confusion and sadness. He maintains a relationship with Elaine while developing his own with Thomas, navigating the complex family dynamics with surprising grace. Sarah grows more delightful and complex each day. She shows early artistic talent, filling sketchbooks with increasingly detailed drawings. Her understanding of her unique family situation evolves as she matures, sometimes expressed through her artwork. Family portraits with additional branches and connections, houses with multiple rooms connected by bridges. When a classmate recently questioned why she went to some man's house on weekends, she responded with simple confidence, "That's my other dad." Thomas. I have two dads because I'm extra special. Her ability to find positive framing for complicated circumstances continually amazes me. Just last week, Sarah crawled into my lap during our nightly reading session and asked whether I was sad when I found out Thomas was her first dad. The question caught me off guard, but I answered honestly, telling her I was very sad at first because I had always thought I was her only dad. She considered this for a moment before patting my cheek and declaring, "But now you're okay because you know I love you the most anyway." Her intuitive understanding of adult emotions sometimes leaves me speechless. If there's a lesson in all of this, perhaps it's that family is what we make it, regardless of its origins. The circumstances that created our current arrangement were painful and would never have been chosen. The betrayal that revealed Sarah's paternity caused harm that continues to reverberate through all our lives. But from that painful revelation, we've constructed something functional, something that allows Sarah to be surrounded by adults who love her, something that prioritizes her well-being over pride or convention. I don't know what the future holds for any of us. Elaine may continue her recovery and develop healthier parenting skills, or she may struggle with the limitations of her condition indefinitely. Thomas and I may maintain our functional co-parenting relationship, or unforeseen challenges might test its stability. My relationship with Claire may deepen into something lasting, or it may prove to be a transitional connection as I continue healing. What I do know is that the children are thriving despite the complexity of their family structure. They feel secure in the knowledge that they are loved by multiple adults who prioritize their well-being. They're developing the emotional intelligence and adaptability that will serve them throughout their lives. Whatever challenges lie ahead, this foundation gives me confidence that we'll navigate them successfully. To those who followed this journey from the beginning, thank you for your support and advice. Your perspectives helped me consider angles I might have missed in the fog of betrayal and shock. To anyone facing similar circumstances, I can offer only this: trust yourself, focus on what truly matters, and remain open to unexpected sources of support. The path forward isn't the one you planned, but it can still lead somewhere worth going. Final update. It's been 2.5 years since my last update, and almost 4 years since that fateful morning when I discovered Elaine's infidelity. So much has changed that I scarcely recognized my life before all this happened. After receiving numerous messages asking for an update, I decided it was time for one final post to bring closure to this chapter of my life. David is now 13, navigating the complexities of middle school with the usual adolescent mixture of confidence and uncertainty. Sarah is 9, blossoming into a thoughtful, creative individual with a strong sense of self. They've both grown so much, not just physically, but emotionally, developing resilience and adaptability that continually impresses everyone around them. Our unconventional family structure has solidified into something that works surprisingly well. Thomas remains a consistent presence in Sarah's life, maintaining his every other weekend schedule with occasional weeknight dinners. He's moved beyond the initial awkwardness of his role to become a genuine parental figure for Sarah. Their relationship has its own character, distinct from her relationship with me, but equally valuable. They share a similar analytical approach to problems and an interest in structures and designs that likely has some genetic component. Last year, Thomas purchased a house with more space, including a larger bedroom for Sarah and a dedicated area for her growing collection of art supplies. He consulted me throughout the process, wanting to ensure the change wouldn't disrupt Sarah's sense of stability. The property is only 15 minutes from our home, allowing for easy transitions and the possibility of Sarah attending the same school, regardless of which parent she's staying with. Thomas and I have established a functional co-parenting relationship that occasionally surprises us both with its effectiveness. We communicate daily, typically through text messages about practical matters, but sometimes through longer conversations about Sarah's development and needs. Our initially rigid boundaries have softened over time, allowing for flexibility when circumstances require it. When Sarah caught the flu during her weekend with Thomas last winter, we worked together to ensure her comfort, with me bringing over her favorite pajamas and Thomas keeping me updated throughout the night. Sarah has developed her own terminology for her family structure. She refers to me as Dad and Thomas as Papa T, a nickname that emerged organically when she was 7. She introduces us to new people as my dad and my other dad, with a matter-of-factness that often prevents further questions. When more detailed explanations are necessary, she handles them with remarkable composure, telling a curious classmate recently, "My mom and dad were married when I was born, but later we found out my biological father is Papa T, so now I have 2 dads who both love me." The relationship between David and Thomas has continued to evolve in positive ways. Despite having no biological connection, they've developed a mentor-mentee relationship centered on shared interests. David discovered a passion for architecture and design that Thomas encourages through projects and occasional visits to his firm. Thomas attends David's baseball games when possible, cheering alongside me without any hint of the tension that characterized our early interactions. Thomas's personal life has stabilized as well. His relationship with Melissa, whom I mentioned in my last update, has grown serious. They were married in a small ceremony last summer, which Sarah attended as a junior bridesmaid. Melissa has approached her relationship with Sarah with appropriate boundaries and genuine warmth. She never attempts to position herself as a mother figure, but has developed her own connection with Sarah based on mutual interests and respect. David was also invited to the wedding, a thoughtful inclusion that reflected Thomas's understanding of the siblings' close bond. My own personal life has seen significant changes. Claire and I continued dating for about a year after my last update, gradually increasing the time we spent together and the integration of our families. Her daughter Emma and my children developed friendships, particularly Sarah and Emma, who discovered a shared love of horses and art. Claire and I found in each other the understanding and patience that comes from shared experiences of betrayal and rebuilding. 18 months ago, I asked Claire to marry me during a weekend away while our children were with their other parents. After nearly 3 years of careful dating and family integration, it felt like the right step forward. She accepted, and we began planning a small wedding that would meaningfully include our children. We were married 6 months ago in our backyard, with David serving as my best man and Sarah and Emma as bridesmaids. Thomas and Melissa attended as guests, a decision that raised some eyebrows among more traditional family members, but felt natural to those of us who had lived this complex journey. Claire's ex-husband attended as well, maintaining the civil relationship they've established for their daughter's benefit. The ceremony included a special section where Claire and I each made promises, not just to each other, but to all 3 children. Sarah, always perceptive, later told me it was her favorite part because it made us official as a whole family. David surprised everyone by giving an eloquent toast during the reception, thanking Claire for bringing happiness back into our home and welcoming Emma as his new sister. Claire and Emma moved into our house a month before the wedding. After a careful transition period that included gradually increasing overnight stays, we converted the home office into a bedroom for Emma, with both girls participating in the decoration decisions. The adjustment period had its challenges, particularly around household routines and space sharing, but we approached each issue with open communication and flexibility. One unexpected outcome of our blended family has been the positive influence of the sibling relationships. David has embraced his role as the oldest, offering guidance to both girls while developing more patience and empathy. Sarah and Emma, despite occasional conflicts, have formed a tight bond that resembles biological sisters. They protect each other at school and have created elaborate imaginary worlds that occupy hours of their playtime. Claire has been remarkable in her approach to our complicated family structure. She supports my ongoing communication with Thomas without jealousy or insecurity, recognizing the benefit to Sarah of having consistent, cooperative parents. She attends events where Thomas is present with genuine goodwill, allowing Sarah to enjoy special occasions without sensing tension between the adults in her life. Perhaps the most challenging aspect of our situation continues to be Elaine. After my last update, she maintained her treatment program for another year, showing enough improvement that her supervised visitation was gradually relaxed. She secured a full-time position at the bookstore, where she had been working part-time, and moved to a slightly larger apartment that allowed both children to have their own sleeping spaces when they visited. For approximately 18 months, things proceeded relatively smoothly. Elaine adhered to the communication protocols established in our parenting agreement, limited her discussion of adult matters with the children, and seemed to be developing a healthier relationship with them based on their current reality rather than wishes for the past. When Claire and I announced our engagement, however, Elaine's behavior deteriorated significantly. She began calling the children outside her designated times, sent me numerous texts alternating between angry accusations and tearful pleas to reconsider, and showed up unannounced at David's baseball game where she created a scene that left him humiliated in front of his teammates. Following this incident, we returned to court to address the violations of our parenting agreement. The judge ordered a psychological evaluation and temporarily suspended Elaine's unsupervised visitation pending the results. The evaluation revealed that Elaine had stopped taking her prescribed medication several months earlier and had been inconsistent in her therapy attendance, despite reporting otherwise to the court. The treatment team recommended a return to more intensive outpatient therapy and supervised visitation until she demonstrated stability for at least 6 months. Elaine initially rejected these findings, insisting the evaluation was biased and that Claire's presence in our lives was the true source of the children's alleged distress. When presented with statements from the children's therapist contradicting this claim, she became distraught in the courtroom, requiring intervention from the court officers. This episode resulted in a modified parenting agreement with stricter supervision requirements and mandatory compliance with treatment protocols, including medication management with regular verification. Elaine's parents, who had stepped back from their supervision role as she appeared to improve, resumed their more active involvement in facilitating visits. The children's reactions to these developments varied according to their ages and personalities. David, entering early adolescence with its natural pull toward peer relationships and independence, began expressing reluctance to spend time with his mother. During a session with Dr. Reynolds, who has continued to provide periodic check-ins for both children, he articulated complex feelings about Elaine, love and concern, mixed with embarrassment and resentment of her unpredictable behavior. After careful consideration and consultation with Dr. Reynolds, we modified David's visitation schedule to shorter, more frequent contacts with Elaine rather than extended weekend visits. This approach allowed him to maintain his relationship with his mother while accommodating his increasing social activities and need for control over his time. Elaine struggled with this change, but eventually accepted it with her therapist's guidance. Sarah's relationship with Elaine presented different challenges. At 9, Sarah has fewer memories of the stable, rediscovery period of our family life. Her primary experience of Elaine has been within the context of supervised visits and treatment programs. While she demonstrates appropriate attachment to her mother, she doesn't share David's conflicted loyalty or nostalgia for an earlier family structure. What Sarah does experience is confusion and sometimes distress when Elaine's behavior becomes erratic. Following the incident at David's baseball game, Sarah asked with uncharacteristic directness, "Is Mom crazy?" This led to a difficult but necessary conversation about mental health, explaining in age-appropriate terms that her mother has an illness that affects her thinking and emotions, just as a physical illness might affect someone's body. We emphasized that Elaine loves her, but sometimes has trouble showing that love in healthy ways because of her condition. Dr. Reynolds helped us develop language for these discussions that neither demonized Elaine nor minimized the impact of her behavior on the children. We focus on specific behaviors rather than general character judgments, distinguishing between the person and their actions. This approach allows the children to maintain appropriate attachment to their mother while developing healthy boundaries around her behavior. Despite these challenges, Elaine has shown intermittent progress over the past year. When compliant with her treatment program, she demonstrates greater insight into her condition and more appropriate interactions with the children. Her therapist reports that she has begun acknowledging, at least in treatment settings, the reality that our marriage is irrevocably over and that her focus needs to be on developing a healthy co-parenting relationship rather than attempting to reconstruct the past. The most recent development in Elaine's situation came 3 months ago when she requested permission to relocate to another city about 2 hours away. Her parents had decided to retire to a smaller community with a lower cost of living, and she wished to move with them, recognizing her continued need for their support. After consultation with the children's therapist and consideration of the potential benefits and challenges, we agreed to the move with a modified visitation schedule that includes fewer but longer visits to accommodate the travel distance. While this change reduces the frequency of the children's contact with Elaine, the quality of their interactions has actually improved. The structured weekend visits with clear beginning and ending times provide predictability that benefits everyone. Elaine appears more regulated in this environment, perhaps due to the decreased pressure of shorter, more frequent interactions or the increased support from her parents in their new setting. The children spend 1 weekend a month with Elaine and her parents, plus extended time during school breaks. Video calls occur twice weekly, scheduled at consistent times that work with the children's activities. This arrangement will be reassessed in 6 months to ensure it continues to meet the children's needs. Thomas's approach to this situation has been consistently supportive. He maintains appropriate distance from direct involvement with Elaine while offering flexibility in his own schedule with Sarah to accommodate the new visitation arrangement. When Sarah returns from visits with Elaine, he coordinates with me to ensure consistency in responding to any concerns or questions she raises. My own relationship with Elaine remains strictly limited to parenting communications, conducted primarily through the co-parenting app ordered by the court. This boundary has been crucial for my continued healing and ability to focus on our current family structure. Claire similarly maintains appropriate distance, never discussing Elaine negatively with the children, but supporting them through any difficulties that arise from their relationship with their mother. Beyond these practical arrangements, our daily life has settled into rhythms that feel increasingly normal, despite their unconventional origins. Claire and I share parenting responsibilities for all 3 children when they're with us, with natural adjustments for the different relationships and histories involved. David and Sarah have maintained their primary attachment to me while developing a respectful, increasingly affectionate relationship with Claire, who navigates her role with remarkable sensitivity. Emma has adapted well to our household, forming connections with each family member that reflect their unique personalities. She and David share a playful, teasing relationship with occasional serious conversations about navigating middle school social dynamics. With Sarah, she's developed a sisterly closeness that involves elaborate creative projects and whispered secrets. Her relationship with me has evolved gradually from polite respect to genuine affection, allowing her to seek my guidance or support while maintaining her special connection with her mother. Claire's ex-husband remains involved in Emma's life through regular visitation and participation in school events. His gambling addiction, which led to their divorce, appears controlled through ongoing treatment, allowing him to rebuild a healthier relationship with his daughter. Claire maintains civil communication with him, focused exclusively on Emma's needs, a model that has been helpful as I navigate my own complex co-parenting situation. Work continues to provide a source of stability and accomplishment separate from family complexities. 2 years ago, I received a significant promotion that increased both my responsibilities and flexibility. The additional income has been helpful in managing the expenses of a larger blended family, while the flexible schedule allows me to be present for important events in all 3 children's lives. Claire works as a curriculum specialist for the school district, a role that aligns her schedule with the children's and allows her to be home during school holidays. We've established routines for sharing household responsibilities that play to our respective strengths and preferences, differences, reducing the friction that often characterizes newly blended families. Financially, we maintain some separation, while sharing household expenses proportionally to our incomes. Thomas continues to contribute to Sarah's expenses, as outlined in our agreement, including a college fund that has grown substantially over the years. Elaine pays modest child support when employed steadily, though this has been inconsistent due to her health challenges. Claire's ex-husband provides regular child support for Emma, which Claire primarily directs to Emma's future education fund, since our household expenses are covered. Looking back over the past 4 years, the transformation in all our lives is remarkable. The initial devastation of discovering Elaine's infidelity and Sarah's paternity seemed insurmountable at the time. The rage, confusion, and grief that consumed me in those early days felt like a permanent state, rather than a passing phase of a longer journey. I couldn't have imagined then the functional, even flourishing family structure we've managed to create from those broken pieces. There have been countless difficult conversations, legal battles, therapy sessions, and emotional setbacks along the way. The path forward wasn't linear or predictable. What made the difference, I believe, was the consistent focus on the children's well-being above all other considerations, above pride, convenience, conventional expectations, or adult grievances. This hasn't meant sacrificing adult happiness for the children's sake, as some mistakenly interpret such priorities. Rather, it's meant evaluating each decision through the lens of what creates stability, security, and healthy relationships for everyone involved. Sometimes this required painful compromise, other times creative problem-solving, and occasionally firm boundaries that others might view as harsh. The relationships between the adults in this situation reflect this child-centered approach. Thomas and I had every reason to view each other with suspicion and resentment, given the circumstances of our connection. Instead, we've developed a relationship based on mutual respect and shared commitment to Sarah's well-being. It's not a friendship in the conventional sense, but it's a partnership that serves its purpose effectively. Claire and I found each other when neither was looking for a relationship, both focused instead on creating stability for our children after marital betrayals. The foundation of understanding and shared values allowed something genuine to develop gradually, without the pressure of trying to replace what was lost or escape the pain of previous experiences. Even my interactions with Elaine, limited as they are, have evolved from raw anger to something more measured and purpose-driven. I'll never fully trust her again, and the pain of her betrayal hasn't disappeared entirely. But I've reached a point where I can acknowledge her role in the children's lives without being consumed by the history between us. The children themselves have demonstrated remarkable resilience throughout this journey. David has processed the dissolution of his parents' marriage, the integration of new family members, and the ongoing challenges of his mother's condition, while maintaining his essential optimism and kindness. He's developed a more nuanced understanding of human behavior and relationships than most adults possess, though I sometimes worry about the weight of this premature wisdom. Sarah has grown up with this complex family structure as her normal, which brings both challenges and benefits. She navigates multiple households and relationships with exceptional adaptability, yet occasionally expresses longing for the simpler family structure some of her friends experience. When these moments arise, we acknowledge the complexity while emphasizing the abundance of love surrounding her. Emma has joined our family with her own history and perspective, adding another layer to our blended dynamic. Her openness to forming new relationships while maintaining important existing ones has enriched our household immeasurably. She and Sarah have developed a bond that transcends their lack of biological connection, demonstrating once again that family is created through presence and care rather than genetics alone. My own healing process continues, though the acute pain has long since transformed into something more manageable. Therapy, which I continued weekly for 2 years and now attend monthly, provided essential tools for processing the betrayal without allowing it to define my future relationships. The support of friends and family who stood by me throughout this ordeal proved invaluable, as did the unexpected connections formed with others who had navigated similar situations. Trust remains the most challenging aspect of moving forward. Claire understood this from the beginning, never taking offense at my initial caution and occasional moments of irrational suspicion. Her patience allowed trust to rebuild gradually through consistent actions rather than demanded declarations. The transparency in our relationship isn't based on surveillance or control, but on mutual commitment to honesty, even when difficult. 4 years ago, if someone had described my current life to me, I would have dismissed it as impossible. The idea that I could peacefully co-parent with the biological father of my daughter, successfully blend a new family, and reach a functional arrangement with the woman who betrayed me so thoroughly would have seemed absurd in those early days of rage and despair. Yet here we are, not in some perfect resolution that erases the pain of what happened, but in a reality that acknowledges that pain while refusing to let it determine our future. The children are thriving academically and socially, maintaining appropriate relationships with all the adults in their lives. The adults have found ways to interact that prioritize the children's needs while protecting their own well-being. Last month, we held a combined birthday celebration for Sarah at a local park. Present were Claire and I, Emma, Thomas and Melissa, Elaine and her parents, my parents, and several of Sarah's friends. The adults maintained polite distance where appropriate, appropriate while cooperating on practical matters. Sarah moved among the various family groupings with easy confidence, never sensing tension or divided loyalties. Watching her blow out the candles surrounded by people who love her, despite the complicated journeys that brought us all together, felt like a tangible representation of what we've managed to accomplish. I've learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting or even fully forgiving in some cases. It means finding a way forward that doesn't allow past wounds to determine future possibilities. It means recognizing that relationships can end without ending the capacity for new connections. Most importantly, it means understanding that family isn't defined by conventional structures or biological ties, but by consistent presence, reliable support, and genuine care. To those who followed this journey from the beginning, thank you for your support, advice, and occasional challenging perspectives. Your input helped shape my thinking during critical decision points when clarity seemed impossible. To those facing similar situations, I can offer only this: focus relentlessly on what matters most, seek professional guidance, and remain open to unexpected sources of healing and growth. The path forward will look different than you planned, but it can still lead somewhere worth going. This will be my final update on this chapter of my life. While the story continues to unfold in ways both predictable and surprising, it's time to close this particular narrative. We continue moving forward, not defined by the betrayal that connected us, but by the relationships we've chosen to build from its aftermath. The children continue to be my greatest source of joy and purpose. David approaches his teenage years with thoughtfulness and integrity that make me profoundly proud. Sarah expresses herself through increasingly sophisticated artwork that often captures the complexity of her world with remarkable insight. Emma brings a perspective and energy to our family that reminds us daily of the unexpected gifts that can emerge from difficult beginnings. Claire and I are building a marriage based on hard-earned wisdom rather than naive optimism, appreciating each day of partnership without taking anything for granted. Thomas continues his own journey, balancing his role in Sarah's life with his marriage and career. Even Elaine, despite her ongoing struggles, shows occasional glimpses of growth and insight that suggest the possibility of a healthier future. Life isn't what I expected or planned. It's messier, more complicated, and in some ways richer than I could have imagined. The betrayal that seemed world-ending 4 years ago has become just one chapter in a longer story. A painful chapter, certainly, but not the defining one. What defines us instead is how we've chosen to move forward, the family we've created from unexpected pieces, and the love that continues to grow despite, or perhaps because of, the challenges we've faced together.